re temele kae
mo go sena sebaka measure wa bile re tla bo re bona jalo e lene tautona Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi a gore ga ka kwano mme jaaka re buile pele gone gore kana monongwaga ga re sa tlhole re le ka go dikagong tsa palamente re ka ga GICC mme yaanong go raya gore dio dingwe di hetogile re bile tsone dikgang tsa dipalo tse e leng gore batho ba ba gore gang ka kwane le bone ba gokotsegile ka dipalo gongwe o tle o re tseye motlhala hela ke dumela gore re tla bo re lebile mo setshwantshong sa rona gale e tla be le gone gore tsaya motlhala gore bontsha gone gore go go tsamaiwa ka tselentseng ja gongwe re bua ka tsone di-changes tse le gale le gale
jaaka se go tlhalositse dithulaganyo tsa ngwaga di fetogile ka mabaka one a COVID-19 protocols thulaganyo e diragala e gompieno e ntse e diragala thata ko dikagong tsa palamente jaanong gompieno e tlabe e diragala ka kwano ka one mabaka a go leka go dira yone social distancing e tlhokagalang
gongwe re tla bo re lebile mo setshwantshong sa rona gale mosanatso e tla be le gone gore o be o re tlhalosetse gone gore ga goroga jaana kana re itse gore gangwe le gape re itse gone gore ga a tsena jaana re itumelela gone go bona dipitsi tsele di goroga a ke sengwe se e leng gore ra go se bona le mo nakong ya gompieno
thulaganyo tota ga ya fetoga thata mo ka ko saedeng yone eo dipitsi di ya go motsa gompieno ko kgorong ya GICC di tlabe di motsisa gona a tla batla a fiwa tlotla ya go feta mo gare ga mophato o eme ka matshesele go kontle
sengwe gape se e leng gore re ka bo re eletsa gone gore re tle re se bone ke gone gore gangwe le gape re itse gore go nna le guard of honor e leng gore re bona le bantsi ka dipalo tse di ko godimo mme mo go la gompieno ke itse gore le go kuditse jalo go na le mo go teng miniguard gongwe re tlhalose miniguard re iseretse ko setshwantsho
miniguard ke mophato o dirilweng ka masole a le 30 le barataro ga ra ka ra dira guard of honor e le gore e tsa masole a le 30 le barataro ka mabaka a one a go dira social distancing
gongwe gape motho o ka botsa gone gore a go gongwe gale le gale kana bangwe ba tla bo ba tshoga gone gore kana o ka re bolenyana bo tla bo botswanyana jaanong mo soneng ya rona e re itseng e re e tlwaetseng gongwe ba sure hela gore ke ngwe ya dio tse e leng gore di kgona go diragala that's why go na le bo guard of honor go na le bo mini guard jalo
ga gona boleng bope bo fokotsegileng ka gore tsone tsamaiso tsone tse re dirang tse ke ditlotla tse di harologane tse re di hang mo tlotlegi tautona e le mo kamela maphata a itshireletso
gongwe gape o be o re lekodise gone ga gore re itse gore o kgona go tsena gare jaana ga masole a dira mo gone gongwe go teng tautona wa ba tlhatlhoba mophato wa masole mo go la gompieno tlhatlhobo eo ra go e bona e dirwa ka tsela ntseng jang ga e le gore e teng kana ke ngwe dio tse e leng gore le di segetse ga thoko le bile tsone dipalo kgotsa go leka gore ba se ka ba amana ka tsela e ntseng jang
maha e le guard of honor tautona o tsamaya gare ga masole a ba tlhatlhoba ka bongwe jwa bone mme yana gompieno ka one mabaka one a COVID-19 o tla ba feta ya la ga gare ga bone ba mohile salute e bidiwang go te presidential salute
re bo re tswelle re ne le gone go tlhalosa gone gore jaaka ba le 36 jaana a tla bo a tsa tsela a gore ga gonega ra go bona go ntse jang mme ga ke lebile mo santsheng sa rena ke a bona gore clerk of the National Assembly o eteletse jalo ene speaker e le mo tsamaisa dipuisano wa palamente e le gone go a hantle ke dumela gore ke a ka ba go mogorosa
tautona ka gore ga o tla ba amogelwa ke motsamaisa dipuisano tsa palamente a patilwe ke Ramasole le Ramapodisi bona le bathusi ba bone ba thusa go tswa go sole ba bo go tiko ADC
hela ya ka o bona mo santsheng sa go mtsana batse ke jaaka speaker a tswela gone hantle e le gone go a go amogela jalo ene tautona Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi go re tsa le re bua gone gore jaaka ba tla bo ba amogela ke speaker jana go tswa mo loring ha ile gore o tla le mo loring go tsa le mo dipitsing o hologa ana le bo manthulaganyo ke ntseng jang
o tla ba tla le mo koloing ya patulwe ke mohumagadi wa go mme ne Masisi le ADC Meja Mogatwane so ha ba goroga ba gologa yalo ba go amogela ke one ba ne ke ba balolla ba le kgantlenyana ba eteletse pele ke motsamisa dipuisano tsa palamente
gongwe re bua ka yone hela ikatiso go tla go goroga mo letsatsing la gompieno gore yone ga re tlhalosa gone gore e ka tswa e tsamaile ka tsela e ntseng jang re lebile gone gore go nna le one band e re itseng gore le bone ba nna palonyana e rile e ko godingwana e le gone go opela jalo dina setšhaba a re bue ka bone mo go la gompieno gore bone le ba rulagantse ka tsela e ntseng jang
mma le bone ba eme malalaotso ba ipaakantse go tla ba opela pina yone ya setšhaba mme re buile ka dipalo gante ke palo hela e tsena mo seatleng mme molodi one o tla utlwala sentle
gongwe re nne re tswelele ka gone go tlhalosa gone gore ga re goroga jalo ka tsone dipitse tse a le tsone ke tse e leng gore di tla di kgwediwa jalo kana di katisitswe hela gone gore tsone di ka itsamaisa di bapisitse jalo yone koloi ya gatautone
dipitse tse ke dipitse tse di dirang tiro e go tswa mo bogologolong di setse di itse ka di tsamaisiwang ka teng le bapalami ba tsone ba katile ba rutegile go di tsamaisa jalo di tsentse kolo ya gatautona ga gare di sireleditse
gongwe lebile mo swantshong ga le meja wa bile o ka re tlhalosetsa yone formation e leng gore ra e bona gone gale ba eme sentle le kapari ra tle re botse gone gore kana kapari ya change gantsi gangwe le gape ga o akantse gone gore go buiwa ka borre ba masole ra akantse jalo go ba bana ba pere camouflage ya kana re le bona mo gola mabane le ikatisa mme ke a bona gompieno gore kapari ke sele le one o nne o re tlhalosetsa
kapari e bua gote ceremonial suit number 1 yone e re e dirisang mo meletlong yotlhe ya BDF e re e dirang mo setšhabeng e bua ceremonial number 1
okay alright re boe re tswelle mosana metso re lebile mo tshwantshong sa rona ra bona gone gore bona le pa babedi ke ba le meja wa bile ba lebagane mo matlhong go tsa ke rialo a ke gona ha e leng gore ra go bona jalo tautena a heta teng go tsa le bone role ya bone ya ka ga ba emejana re e bitsa re reng
jaaka ba eme malalala go tse go batle ba bulele bagolo ga ba goroga le mabapi yo mongwe ka letsogong la ga tautona yo mongwe ga letsogong la ga mohumagadimme neo Masisi
gongwe thulaganyo yotlhe e leng gore re ntse re le ka gona go e tlhalosa re reng gongwe re bue boleng jwa yone sekao sa yone re lebile thulaganyo ya rona ya sesole re lebile serodimo sa ga tautone a re bue hela ka yone bo mosola jwa yone kgotsa boleng jwa yone gore bo raeng
tota jaaka re eme yaka re emeana re emetse go fa tautona tlotla e le mo kamela maphata a itshireletso
ba bangwe ke bao ra ba bona meja ba role dihutsinyana mo motlhogong di na le bibitswanyana le bontshonyana gongwe le bone re ne re tlhalose gone gore bone ba apere pharologanyo go na le mo gone o bua gore ke ceremonial number 1 bone ba apere ke e tshounyana go na le marogo a montsho gongwe le one re e tlhalosa
ma e ntse le one ke bontlhamongwe jwa kapari yone ya ceremonial celebrations bao ke ba batle ba itsise go goroga ga tautona ka goroga ke ba lephata la band
ke bona ba e leng gore ba tla bo ba betsa jalo our national anthem gone mo teng
ma ba batle ba letse mo go teng ke gone fanfare go supa gore tautona o se sa gorogile mo dia go ntse then e tla re ga ntse go tsweletse be ba kopana le ba bangwe ba go letsa yone pina ya setšhaba jaaka ba bona se ba emeyang
gongwe re bua ka yone bente ga ke itse gore a o swere yone dipalo tsa bone gore ba ka tsa ba le kae
ga ke a tshwara dipalo ga mme ke swara bone ba ka tswa ba le lesome le bobedi kana lesome le bone
le bone kapari ya bone ke a bona gore harologane mme ga re tsena mo teng ga palamente ke di bona gore motsana wa bona gone gore social distancing e leng gore go buiwa ka yone gangwe le gape ke ba botsogo gone gore go katologane jalo go seka ga mapa ra bona gore mo GICC go a kgonagala ke ga o lebile mo santshong sa gago gone gore mapalamente ba eme sentle ba emetse jalo gone go gorosa tautona e le tlotla e ba maenelang gangwe le gape ra bona gore mongwe le mongwe o eme ka dinao e le yone protocol kgotsa tsamaiso e diragalang gangwe le gape ga mogolo a goroga mme ke ntse ke tswelela le meja wa bile re nna le gone re ntse re buisana gore gongwe re lebe ka ga letsogo la rona ka ga la molema re lebelele ka ga seemo sa bone ka ga ba emeng ka teng le one o ne o re tlhalosetse gone gore ba eme jang ka tsela e ntseng jang ke dumela gore ga ba lebile jaana le kapari ya bone o ka kgona gore ba identify o kgone go lemoga gore yole ke a seemo sa gore ke a maemo a gore mme ebile tiro ya gagwe ga tautona gore ga jaana e tla be le go dira selesa
ke tlhalose ba se sole hela ka ke ba itse ba ba emeng ba apere mmala o botala jwa tlhaga ke ba le gore ba tlhokometse one moalo wa tautona gore o se ka ga nna le makgwere ape mo teng ba make sure gore o phepa
ke bone ba nga red carpet go netefatsa gona gore ga gona ope yo e gatang pele ga re bona jalo his excellency a gata
go ntse jalo
mme re ntse re eme o sana ba se re go mo komaletse gona go bona jalo tautona a gore ga gone ka kwano ke na le re wa bile a le ka gore gone re tsamaisa ka yone tsamaiso gone go bona gore re tsamaya ka tsela e ntseng jang mme re lebile mo teng ga parlamente ga le gone wa bona gore ba ba ka ntse jalo mme gongwe re sentse re emetse tautona re tabogela gona ka go dikantorong tsa rona tsa Botswana television ke ne le jalo re o nthatile boti e tla re hela ga tautona a goroga e be re phamola jalo re boela ka kwano re tla go bontsha ke ntse ke na le ene meja wa bile e le gona gore tsamaisa jalo le tautona a goroga mo teng ga parlamente mme re tswela re ntse re le gone ga GICC motsana wa tsho re boetse ka kwano e le gone go nna re ntse re emetse ene tautona ba lehatsi la rona Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi gore a tle go tswela jalo re bue jalo a re lekudise ka tekodiso ya setšhaba mme ela jaaka ke ne ke setse ke buile motsana wa tsho gongwe ke go gakollega gone gore mo go la gompieno re sologetse go bona jalo gone gore ga parlamente e boela e be re buisana jalo le mapalamente a mangwe ka diphathi tse di harologaneng bogologolo wa bene party ya UDC ga mmogo le ba party ya PDP e le gona go utlwa gone gore bone ba tsibogela jang pego ya ga tautona re bile tseleng gore o tla ba di beile setšhaba pele tsana wetse ke tla go lekudisa ka maina a bone kgante jananyana ga re setse re tla bo re buisana le bone mme ela itse jalo gone gore jaaka ne ke go tlhaloseditse pele gone gore mo go la gompieno re bane diphetogo gale le gale ke dumela gore ntse o lebile mo santshong sa gago ga o kgonne go lemoga gone gore mapalamente ga gona yope yo tsile le mohumagadi wa gagwe e lengwe ya di-protocols tse e leng gore di a diragala mo nongwaga re lebile gone go hokotsa dipalo re bua ka COVID-19 mme ela re boele ka ga motsana betso re lebe jalo mo santshong sa rena re bona jalo tautona wa goroga ke tla bo ke ntse ke bua ga le meja wa bile e le gore tsa loeto gore tlhalosetsa gone gore go diragala ka tseleng tse jang re ba bile le ba mo santshong sa rona ga o bone gone gore ra bona gore tautona wa goroga e ko pele ke ye le PC e tshwere flaga ya Botswana mme re leke go e tlhalosa ke dumela gore ke yona kolo e hagarele
dipitsi tseo ya ka di bona di tsa re tautona ko kgorong ya Grand Park di tse di kopele tseo di tsentse flaga ya Botswana e tshwere ke sergeant ke Hakile Pete tse di ko morago tseo di tshwere flaga ya BDF e tshotseng ke sergeant Olopile ke latile di flaga tse ya Botswana tse e supa gore re le BDF re mangwe a maphata a puso ya Botswana yeo ya BDF ke yone e re supang jaanong rona re le ga re le batshegetsi ba moletlo wa gompieno
le ya ka tsamaya jaana ke a bona gore o gagara ga tsone ga di pitsitse gongwe re bua ka formation a tsone tse di gapele ke a bona gore ba gapele gale ba 2467
dipitsi tse tsotlhe di lesome le bone jaaka re buile ka mabaka a COVID di hopoditse go tswa ko palong ya masome a mabedi gore di nne 14 tse di kopile di 7 tse di ko morago le tsone di 7
mme jaaka re bile jaana ke utlwa modumo gantle gale ke ipotsa gore a ke yone modumo o leng gone go supa gone gore tautona wa goroga jaaka re lebile mo santshong jaana ba leka go supa eng ka o ne go letsa modumo
modumo o kwa moeteledipele wa mophato o gantle o emeng matsetsele ko go leka go tsibosa gore ba ne mo seemong sa go amogela tautona ka tla ba goroga jaana
gongwe re lebe gape le ga re tla re bone gone gore ga golo ganteng wa go tsena ka tseleng tseng jang tlhalosa
ga gologana wa go amogelwa ke motsamaisa dipuisano tsa palamente a patilwe ke Ramasole le Ramapodisi ba tla ebe ba heta mo malong no mohibidio ile go mo fa tlotla yone eo jaaka ba mo maemong a ba mo go tsone presidential salute e ba e fang auto
ga ngwe le gape re itse gore ga goroga jaana ke gone ga tla bonga tlhatlhoba mo phatoteng go diragala jang ga tsoga
magompieno ga ona go tlhatlhoba ka tsela eo mme o tla ba heta gare ga one hela e le tlotla e a e fiwang ke rona re le ba DDF.
ke utlwile o bua ka molotsana ole o ne o tswa o le kgantele o tlhalosa gona gore e tla re gata utona a le gaufi ba simolola go letsa jalo ba itsise yone bent
mamolotsana ko o supa gore tautona go gorogile o se sa le mo diagong tsone tsena ba nne malalala
gongwe re thena re leba ka ga re bona gone gore wa goroga bogolo go a tsena gone gale yaka re tla bo re lebile mme ke yaka a tla bo a tsena gone mo teng ga palamente e le gone go a go rola jalo pego ya botsogo jwa setšhaba re lebile jalo mo tshwantsong sa rona ba tsanagela botlhe ba e leng gore ba ne ba mosetse morago ba motlhatlhama ka tsela ntseng jalo mme ela motsana se se e leng gore se tla bo diragala mo go la gompieno ga o lebile mo tshwantsong sa gago re tla bo re lebile gone gore ya go tsamaya ka tsela e ntseng jang ba eteletsepele ke bona ba tsena jalo mo teng ga palamente ke yona ga e leng gore ke tla bo ke ba rolela jaanong mo go se sebaka ka jaana hela ga nna mo setulong sa gago thulaganyo e tla bo isimolola e le gone go rola jalo pego ya botsogo jwa setšhaba tla ke ba rolele jalo motsana wa gore se ka ra siwa ke ditiragalo
Pray be seated. Mr. Speaker, before I address this August House, I'd like to request that we observe a moment of silence in remembrance of our citizens who have departed during the course of this year. Amen. I therefore extend my deepest condolences to the bereaved families who lost their loved ones. Today's address is being delivered against the backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic, which has negatively affected our lives and all productive sectors of our economy, including mining, manufacturing, the service industry, and tourism. However, I wish to express government's unwavering commitment to fighting this scourge, and I will outline during this address how. I want to assure you that despite the challenges presented by COVID-19, government remains steadfast in its promise to create jobs, particularly for our young people. Following the onset of COVID-19, we shall focus more sharply on promoting Botswana's digitization, providing quality education, and ensuring that our people have reliable electricity, water, roads, hospitals, and schools. Mr. Speaker, I wish to express my profound gratitude to honourable members of Parliament for their support to government in approving the extension of the state of emergency, which was meant to contain the spread and transmission of COVID-19. This is indeed a clear manifestation of political maturity and patriotism by all of us, despite our political differences. We may have differed politically, but at the end of the day, we have all put Botswana first, and this is commendable. Similarly, let me thank the frontline workers, particularly the drafters of our legislation, the medical doctors, health professionals, immigration officials, truck drivers, and our law enforcement agencies, whose contribution to the containment of the pandemic remains outstanding and exemplary. I also wish to recognize and appreciate the private sector, civil society, development partners, and individuals alike for their continued support to government's efforts to fight the coronavirus pandemic, including their contribution to the COVID-19 Relief Fund. To this end, allow me to take this opportunity to sincerely thank Botswana and residents for continuing to comply with the COVID-19 health protocols, a move that will significantly save many lives in our country. Honourable members, as you all know, we have embarked on an ambitious national vision of transforming our economy from an upper middle income country to a high income country by 2036. This vision will be driven by a knowledge-based and inclusive economy, underpinned by democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, and respect for human rights. As government, we will strive to attain a diversified and inclusive economy that will ensure a free, fair, and prosperous Botswana, guided by the principles of leaving no one behind. This has been the first time that I report on our progress in the last 12 months, immediately after the adoption of the midterm review of the 11th National Development Plan by Parliament. It is critical that we put in place measures that will ensure an effective implementation of our national transformation strategy. Therefore, during the implementation of the remainder of NDP 11, we will be focusing on the following thematic areas which were agreed by Parliament: economy and employment, social upliftment, sustainable environment, and governance, peace and security. I urge honourable members of Parliament to continue supporting government to take this country to greater heights. At this juncture, Mr. Speaker, let me recognize my special guests who are in the public gallery for their sterling performance and contribution in their different ways to different sectors. They are Mr. Penyo Shama Bernard. Mr. Bernard, who is the winner of the 2019 President's Golden Award. The annual award is bestowed on the top achiever in the Botswana General Examinations, Secondary Education, Final Examinations. Penyo scooped 8 A stars, 1 A, and 2 Bs. Thank you, Penyo. The second is Mr. Mokgweetsi, a successful entrepreneur who, through CEDA funding, manufactures sanitary pads, which he exports to Rwanda. The other is Mr. Tiramudimu Simanka, a graduate of Food Science and Technology from the Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, who participated in an 11-month exchange program in high-tech farms in Israel. Alongside 5 other participants, they have since formed a company that offers agronomic services to farmers. The other is Mrs. Babedira Nkoro, a Wits University Law graduate who currently serves this great nation as a magistrate. She has served at the Specialized Maintenance Court in Extension 2 and is currently at the Traffic Court in Broadhurst. She is with her husband, who is also an attorney in private practice. The other is Professor Vasil Kuloles, an ICT presidential advisor, and has been kind enough to volunteer services to the government in the Republic of Botswana without remuneration. And the last but not least is Sergeant Paleseng Piluyakhumu of the Botswana Police Service, representing all our frontline workers. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, according to the latest International Monetary Fund's World Economic Outlook update, released in October 2020, the global economy is projected to contract by 4.4% this year. Projections indicate that all regions of the world will experience negative growth in 2020, with advanced economies recording the lowest growth of 5.8%. Economic activity in emerging markets and developing economies is projected to contract by 3.3% in 2020, while growth in sub-Saharan Africa is expected to register -3%. Hence, this is expected to be the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The World Economic Outlook update, however, projects a gradual recovery in the coming year, with global growth forecast to strengthen to 5.2% in 2021, while the sub-Saharan region should attain a growth of 3.1%. This is expected to have a positive effect on the performance of our own domestic economy. Domestic Economic Review and Outlook. In 2019, the domestic economy grew by 3%, as against a projected growth of 4.2%. The relatively low growth rate was mainly attributable to a contraction in mining output, as well as a deceleration in non-mining GDP growth. Mining output fell by 3.9% in 2019, mainly due to the weak performance of the diamond subsector, while non-mining GDP grew by 3.8% in 2019. The slower growth in the non-mining GDP was primarily due to slower growth in the manufacturing, construction, transport, and communications, as well as the services sectors. During 2020, the domestic economy is expected to contract by 8.9%. This is attributed to an expected sharp decline in major sectors such as mining at -24.5%, trade, hotels, and restaurants at -27.4%, construction -6%, manufacturing at -3.9%, and transport and communications at -2.5%. The economy is, however, expected to rebound during 2021, with overall growth projected at 7.7%. The anticipated recovery will be driven by a rebound in growth of major sectors such as mining at 14.4%, trade, hotels, and restaurants at 18.8%, and transport and communications at 4.2%. The recovery will also be supported by the Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, currently being implemented by government. It is critical to note that these projections are dependent upon, among others, the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic and related restrictions. These containment measures have the effect of reducing spending by firms and households and causing supply chain disruptions. Beyond this, the recovery phase will be influenced by confidence effects on households and businesses, sectoral transformation and changes in work patterns, as well as prospects for the recovery of gradual global financial markets and commodity prices. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, there still remains the delicate balance of opening the economy while containing the disease burden. Inflation. According to the latest data from Statistics Botswana, inflation fell significantly from 2.2% in September 2019 to 1.8% in September 2020, remaining below the lower bound of the Bank of Botswana's medium-term objective range of 3 to 6%. The significant decline in inflation mainly reflects the downward adjustment in fuel prices in June of 2020. However, inflation may rise above the current forecasts if the international commodity prices increase beyond current projections and in the event of upward price pressures occasioned by supply constraints due to travel restrictions and lockdowns. Exchange policy. The objective of exchange rate policy is to maintain a stable value for the pula in real terms, that is, after adjusting for inflation. Stability in the real effective exchange rate, REER, aims to anchor the competitiveness of Botswana's producers in both domestic and export markets. In 2020, there was a need to respond to foreign exchange market instability resulting from COVID-19, in particular, the appreciation of the pula against the South African rand, which caused challenges for Botswana's firms exporting to South Africa or competing with imports. As a result, the downward crawl of the pula exchange rate was increased from 1.51% annually to 2.87%, with effect from May 1st, 2020. While the exchange rate plays a key role in supporting competitiveness, which should contribute to economic growth and employment creation, lasting competitiveness needs to be anchored on economy-wide productivity improvements, some of which are addressed by the envisaged transformation and policy reforms. Foreign exchange reserves. During 2019, the foreign exchange reserves declined by 8.7% from 71.4 billion pula in December 2018 to 65.3 billion pula in December 2019. The reserves declined further this year, falling by 2.3% to 63.7 billion pula in July 2020. The decrease was mainly due to foreign exchange outflows associated with government obligations and economy-wide import requirements. The level of reserves as of July 2020 was equivalent to 11.6 months of import cover of goods and services. Of the total amount of reserves, 13.7 billion pula, or 22%, was attributed to the government investment account. COVID-19 response plan. In April 2020, government introduced an economic relief package to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 virus and keep economic activity and livelihoods afloat. To this end, more than 4 billion pula was spent on various components of the relief package. So far, the funds have been utilized as follows: wage subsidies for 3 months for employees in businesses adversely affected by COVID-19, the provision of deferment of profit taxes payable by businesses, 3, waiver on the training levy for 6 months, 4, loan guarantee scheme to support access to bank credit by affected businesses, 5, increasing health and other expenditure directly related to COVID-19, such as treatment, testing, quarantine, and contact tracing. 6, the provision of food baskets for eligible low-income households, and 7, repayment holidays for bank loans for adversely affected borrowers. In implementing some of these initiatives, several challenges were encountered, including shortages of supplies, limited implementation capacity, lack of data, and limited revenues available to government. Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, ERTP. Following the adoption of the Economic Relief Package, government developed an Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, which was approved by Parliament in December 2020. The ERTP is an addendum to the midterm review of NDP 11, and it is aligned to the National Vision 2036. The plan is expected to reboot the economy and to cushion it from the unprecedented shock brought about by COVID-19. Government has allocated 14,500 million pula for the implementation of the ERTP. The amount will be spread over the remaining years of NDP 11. Government is currently looking at several options to finance this additional expenditure, with a preference for domestic borrowing and additional revenue mobilization. Where necessary, government will consider other financing options to accommodate any outstanding needs. Government has set up an industry support fund to the amount of 1,300 million pula to support local businesses. Additionally, the National Development Bank established a 50 million pula agribusiness stimulus fund to promote smart farming. It also supported SMMEs to supply essential goods and services during the pandemic. Furthermore, NDB created a 20 million pula essential services fund to assist businesses with purchase order financing. Decent work and investment promotion. Mr. Speaker, employment creation remains Botswana's top priority, hence the continued exploration of opportunities to create sustainable and decent jobs for our people. Government is fully committed to the promotion of decent work, as demonstrated through the signing of the Botswana Decent Work Country Programme for 2020 to 2024 by government, employers, and workers' representatives, as well as the International Labour Organization in February of 2020. The program is anchored on 3 pillars, namely creation of sustainable and decent employment, enhanced social protection and conditions of work, as well as strong labour market governance institutions. Tripartite consultations on the review of some labour laws will be finalized this financial year, paving way for the drafting of the bills on the proposed changes to the laws to align them with relevant international instruments. Some of the emerging labour issues that were occasioned by the COVID-19 are not adequately catered for in our labour laws. As you are aware, during the state of emergency, regulations were introduced to prevent dismissals and industrial action. Youth employment. Mr. Speaker, the government of Botswana continues to implement initiatives and programs that are geared towards empowering young people in businesses and skills development. During the 2019-2020 financial year, a total of 975 businesses owned by young people were funded at a cost of 94,671,778 pula, and in the process, creating 1,918 jobs. Government also funded 24 non-governmental organizations to implement character building and life skills development programs with focus on unemployed youth without formal training. In this regard, a total of 160,962 youth were trained from April 2020 to date. In addition, funds amounting to 125,000 pula were allocated for skills development in Gaborone, Francistown, Gatleng, Gantsi, and Seliba Pikwe. As of July 2020, enrollment in volunteer programs averaged 16,326. During the same period, the number of interns absorbed in formal employment was 8,400 1,557. A total of 1,954 jobs were created through the Youth Development Fund from my last report to date. Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency. Mr. Speaker, during the 2019-2020 financial year, the Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency, CEDA, funded 2,127 businesses valued at 451 million pula. In addition, the agency financed 1,442 businesses owned by women at a value of 134 million pula, and 568 youth-led businesses at 27 million pula. In terms of sector funding, the service sector was the most funded at 55%, followed by agriculture at 28%, property at 10%, and manufacturing at 7%. This translated in the creation of 3,883 jobs during the period under review. The revised CEDA guidelines will play a facilitative role in the realization of broad-based citizen economic empowerment. These guidelines offer concessionary lending terms and longer repayment periods. Government has identified agro-processing, construction, technology and innovation, energy, manufacturing, agriculture, tourism and mining, as well as the creative industry as priority sectors. CEDA launched the Letabile product to resuscitate the informal sector, which was affected by COVID-19. The product has to date assisted 3,873 micro businesses valued at 17,600,000 pula and protected 4,066 jobs. Moreover, the agency created a COVID-19 relief fund which has assisted 62 businesses at a cost of 35 million pula. The Botswana Development Corporation. During the 2019-2020 financial year, the Botswana Development Corporation invested a total of 1,099 million pula. And 39 million pula. I'll say that again. The Botswana Development Corporation invested a total of 1,039 million pula in the services, property, and tourism sectors. The total foreign direct investment stood at 533,600,000 pula, while the total domestic investment was valued at 506,300,000 pula. This comprised new domestic investments valued at 320,500,000 pula. Expansions, on the other hand, were valued at 177,800,000 pula. Among the BDC's projects achievements during this period is the establishment of the Francistown Academic Hospital with a 75-bed capacity which offers medical training facilities. This project has created 270 jobs. Botswana Investment and Trade Center. Mr. Speaker, the Botswana Investment and Trade Center continues to implement a robust export promotion program in line with a new national export strategy. Exporting companies which benefited from the BITC services realized 2,783 million pula worth of export earnings between April 2019 and June 2020. Over the same period, BITC realized cumulative foreign direct investment inflows amounting to 3,079 million pula against the target of 2,450 million pula. Between April 2019 and June 2020, the Botswana Investment and Trade Center's investment promotion drive resulted in the creation of 4,382 jobs. The service sector was the highest performer, followed by manufacturing, agriculture, and agro-processing sectors. SPEDU. The construction of the SPEDU Industrial and Urban Agriculture Land Servicing Project commenced in August 2020, and it is expected to be completed by June 2023. Once complete, the project is expected to create 3,500 jobs with an investment value of 1,200,000,000 pula. Special Economic Zone Authority. Mr. Speaker, the Special Economic Zones Authority, or SEZA for short, currently has 15 potential investors, with an estimated investment value exceeding 10 billion pula. The first company was licensed in June 2020 and will begin to operate as a brownfield investment company from Sekgama International Airport. The company will expand its operations in Botswana. 3 others are at licensing stage. In addition, the detailed design and land servicing of the Sekgama International Airport Special Economic Zone Phase 1, which measures approximately 100 hectares, has commenced, and it is planned to be completed in May 2021. Furthermore, the design and construction of 12 steel grain silos with an overall storage capacity of 60,000 metric tons is underway at the Pandamatenga Special Economic Zone and will be completed by August 2021. Local Enterprise Authority. Mr. Speaker, in its endeavor to promote entrepreneurship and small, medium, and micro enterprises development, the Local Enterprise Authority is focusing on agriculture and manufacturing sectors as key drivers for job creation. LEA currently supports 1,078 SMMEs across the country, with 51 of them being accommodated in LEA incubators and factory shells. The combined contribution of these enterprises to GDP stood at 420 million pula. 420,200,000 pula in revenue from April 2019 to September of 2020. Through LEA's marketing linkages facilitation, the supported SMMEs have managed to supply national retailers and parastatals to the value of 52,470,000 pula from April 2019 to September 2020, while the value of goods and services that contributed towards import substitution stood at 47,200,000 pula. In spite of the challenging trading environment, the assistance availed to SMMEs to improve quality and secure markets led to the creation of 1,391 new jobs. LEA commenced an SMME registration exercise from April 2020. The registration will provide the necessary data to inform future enterprise development initiatives, as well as the ability to measure the impact of interventions in the form of SMME contribution to employment and the gross domestic product. Economic inclusion and empowerment. In an effort to promote citizen economic empowerment, government is developing the Economic Inclusion Law, which seeks to strengthen the enforcement of citizen economic empowerment initiatives to ensure meaningful participation of citizens in the economy. The law is expected to be presented to Parliament before the end of this financial year. Furthermore, government's focus on transformation has necessitated the review of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, PPAD Act, and the Local Authorities Procurement and Asset Disposal, or LAPAD Act, with a view to aligning them to the transformation agenda. The reviews will help government realize empowerment of citizens through public procurement and reducing the country's import bill, especially for power supply, clothing apparel, leather products, and food imports, promoting the domestic production base, thereby creating jobs for citizens and growing the economy through targeted sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. The new laws will also deter fronting and frivolous complaints. Government will also consider their review of the 30% reservation policy for citizen-owned companies to a minimum 60% for major projects in this country. Ease of doing business. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Industrial and Trade Regulations Act commenced in June 2020. Under the regulations, only 10 trade activities which have public health and safety requirements now need licensing, while the remaining 35 trade activities can start operations and register with councils within 30 days of operation. Furthermore, the new Act has abolished trade licensing committees and introduced over-the-counter licensing. The review of the Industrial Development Policy, which will be completed by December 2021, is ongoing. Its primary objective is to align it to the Southern Africa Development Community Protocol on Industry. However, as part of its efforts to implement the Industrial Development Policy, government has over the years introduced statutory instruments, including the recently imposed restrictions on the importation of bread and confectionery, as well as face masks to support the local industry. The purpose of these instruments is to stimulate local economic growth and investment. As a way of improving the business environment, government will continue to review immigration policies and acts to facilitate the ease of doing business in Botswana. Government is reviewing both the Immigration and Citizenship Acts and is also in the process of finalizing a migration policy in collaboration with the Southern African Development Community. These processes will be completed by the end of March 2021. In an endeavor to make Botswana the country of choice for international tourists and investors, government in 2019 introduced reforms which include the decentralization of visa applications to Botswana's diplomatic missions and the issuance of visa at some ports of entry. In addition, a relaxation of the visa requirements was introduced to make doing business in Botswana smooth and seamless. Ultimately, the intention is to provide the services digitally after seamless integration of systems. Trade facilitation, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Mr. Speaker, following the postponement of the start of trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which was set for 1st July 2020 to 1st January 2021, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Botswana has commenced preparations towards the agreed timelines. Together with other 55 member states of the African Union, Botswana is working towards completing work on tariff liberalization, rules of origin and services, the conclusion of which will provide market access for Botswana's goods and services to a larger African market of 1,200,000,000 African people. The tripartite free trade area. Mr. Speaker, the ratification of the tripartite free trade area agreement was successfully concluded on the 30th of January 2020. By ratifying the TFTA agreement, Botswana has secured a duty-free market for a variety of her products, including breeding animals, beef, salt, vaccines for livestock, plastic pipes and tubes, pharmaceutical and copper products, semen and embryos for animals, that is, and the entire value chain. The private sector will therefore have access to new and dynamic markets for exports and new sources of imports for domestic production processes, thereby enhancing intra-regional trade. The TFTA comprises 27 countries from the 3 regional economic communities, namely the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, and the East African Community, EAC, and the Southern African Development Community, SADC, with a combined population of nearly 600 million people. Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, as is commonly known, is currently under a 3-month biannual review process due for completion by the end of this month. To date, 4 local companies are exporting natural products such as morula oil, organic honey, and gomoe gems, following attainment of fair trade certification. National capacity audits on the jewelry and semi-processed stones have been completed. The newly established Leather Entrepreneur Association, with a membership of 100 players in the sector's value chains, including abattoirs, collectors, exporters, traditional tanners, manufacturers, and suppliers, has developed a roadmap for capacity building and accessing the US market. Agricultural sector, dairy, Mr. Speaker. There are 59 dairy farmers in Botswana who produce 8,100,000 liters of milk annually, which is only 12% of the national demand. The biggest challenge besieging the dairy industry is the shortage of production of dairy animal feeds locally. Through the Economic Recovery Transformation Plan, government will therefore develop fodder banks in strategic locations for the cattle industry. Government, through the Industry Facility Support Fund, will assist smallholder dairy farmers to increase their production capacities by providing them with an accelerated business subsidy and an interest-free loan, which will be administered by the National Development Bank. This intervention is expected to grow the dairy industry by at least 18% in the next 24 months. Clusters for fodder production in Molepolole, Lobatse, the Northeast, and Gamiland will be promoted. In addition, government will renovate and upgrade existing milking, pasteurizing centers in Tonota, Pitsani, Molopo, Serowe, and Sunnyside, and outsource their management to farmers by March 2021. Integrated Support Program for Arable Agricultural Development, or ISPAD. Government is reviewing the Integrated Support Program for Arable Agricultural Development with the intention of creating an efficient and sustainable program. The new program will be launched during the course of 2021, next year. Among its key elements will be debushing, shifting the weighting of the subsidy more towards outputs and realignment of fields to enable critical infrastructure developments, such as digitization, roads, and water, among others. Beef cluster development. Mr. Speaker, the beef industry has been besieged with challenges over time, and this has affected the different stakeholders within the industry. Government is, however, committed to revive the beef industry and, to this end, utilize the adopted beef cluster model to ensure its competitiveness and sustainability. It is expected that through this model, cattle farmers will get the true market value of their products, which will present an opportunity to improve the economic returns to Botswana farmers. Biosecurity. Mr. Speaker, there was an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, FMD, in the Okavango region, which was reported in October 2020 in the Ncamasere extension at Kakao. All affected cattle were vaccinated. I therefore call upon Botswana around the Okavango region to continue taking the necessary measures to reduce the spread of FMD. Government is currently working on relief measures as a matter of urgency to assist affected households in the Buteti and Gamiland areas. Help is on the way. Between February and June of 2020, there was an invasion of locusts in the Ngamiland, Buteti, and Chobe districts, which significantly damaged the grazing land and crops. In September 2020, Botswana swarms of the African migratory locusts from neighboring countries flocked to Chobe, and to date, over 53 swarms have been identified, out of which 48 were controlled. Controlled means killed. Small stock production. Mr. Speaker, government has secured a market to supply goat and sheep meat in the Middle East and Europe, and modalities are underway to meet market regulatory requirements in the targeted countries. In order to comply with the traceability requirements of the market, all goats and sheep will be registered under the Botswana Animal Traceability System, BATES. Farmers will be required to tag their goats and sheep with electronic ear tags as part of compliance. Government has identified 3 export slaughter facilities for goats and sheep at the Botswana Meat Commission in Francistown, the Multi-Species Abattoir of Botswana in Gaborone, and the Meat Inspection Training Institute Abattoir in Lobatsi. As part of improving small stock production at farm level, government has rejuvenated Lubu Farm in the Kala district, where stud and commercial stock of goats and sheep are bred and sold to farmers to improve genetics of their animals. The Lubu Farm concept is being replicated at Impala Rural Training Center in Francistown to cater for farmers in the northern part of the country. Other government farms will be readied for allocation to citizen small stock farmers before the end of this financial year. The National Policy on Agricultural Development is under review and will be tabled during this sitting of Parliament. The review of the policy seeks to address emerging challenges and create jobs, especially for our young people, and making agriculture more inclusive and attractive. Mr. Speaker, I have recently embarked on an initiative to promote small stock production in the country, and I have met people whose testimonies have motivated me to do even more to grow it and make it one of the key drivers of our economy. For instance, Jose Boitshwarelo Difemo of Lotlhakane West appreciated the abundance of goats resulting from the successes of the Livestock Management and Infrastructure Development Limit Program. I also met Ms. Emily Silabeka, a small stock farmer in Kudumatse, in Mahalape East, who expressed gratitude to government and promised to increase her herd in anticipation of the international market for small stock. More than anything else, she appreciated the economic potential of serious small stock farming with the aim of exporting. This she promised to do. Mining, minerals, and energy. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 has affected the sale of diamonds globally. However, the United States of America, China, and Europe have started showing signs of recovery, which gives us hope that by December 2020, the diamond market would have stabilized. As a means to stimulate diamond sales, government granted short-term permits to local diamond companies to conduct sales outside the country. The permits are valid until the end of December 2020. In order to facilitate local participation in the downstream diamond industry, government has developed a beneficiation strategy to facilitate citizen participation. To this end, in the first half of 2020, the local diamond cutting and polishing industry was supplied with approximately 1.5 billion pula worth of rough diamonds. The mining industry is continuing with some of the strategic projects such as Joining Mine Cut 9, Morupule Open Cast, Komekao Mine Development, and Karoe Underground Diamond Mine. The development of Komekao Mine is progressing well, with planned commissioning during the first quarter of 2021. The mine will be highly mechanized, using the latest automated mining technology to improve productivity and safety. The mine currently employs 2,131, of which 1,951, or 92%, are citizens, and has a comprehensive training program to equip employees with requisite technical skills. Morupule Coal Mine open pit and processing plant construction is well underway and is anticipated to be commissioned in September 2021. The new expansion will produce an additional 1 million tons of washed coal to be sold locally and exported into the region. It currently employs 370 6 people. At full production, it is expected to create about 400 permanent jobs. Joining Mine Cut 9 project is also progressing well, and currently the project employs 501 employees, 97% of which are citizens. The company is targeting to develop citizen suppliers in key areas of the value chain, including setting up an artisan training center and component rebuild facility. Let me underscore the crucial importance of ensuring that Botswana significantly benefit from the Cut 9 project and other mining projects. Mr. Speaker, Botswana Ash is currently conducting a feasibility study to diversify its product through beneficiation of the sewer pan brines. The project is expected to come into stream in 2024. It will produce a premium fertilizer, sulfate of potash, among other products, while increasing its contribution to the industrial base of the country and food security. As part of the Government of Botswana's commitment to promote mineral exploration, and in response to the increasing demand for technology metals, Botswana Geoscience Institute started a consultancy project called Assessment of Mafic and Ultramafic and Granite Complexes in June 2020. The project's primary objective is to identify mineral potential that includes platinum, group metals, base metals, and precious metals, as well as rare earth metals and battery metals, which are currently being explored in the Simarula area around Molepolole and Shoshong in the Central District. The project will be completed in February 2023. BCL liquidation. Mr. Speaker, care and maintenance of BCL group assets at the Silibepikwe, Phoenix, and Selkirk sites continues in order to preserve them for potential investors. The liquidators have received 3 indicative offers for the estate, which are currently under evaluation. It is anticipated that by the end of December 2020, a preferred bidder would have been identified with a view to complete the transaction during the course of 2021 after detailed due diligence. Government is making efforts to promote and catalyze domestic cement production. The Botswana Geoscience Institute is currently involved in a project to identify raw materials for cement production in Botswana. So far, the Letlhakeng Calcrete deposit in Kweneng West has the potential for a cement plant. Electricity generation. Mr. Speaker, energy security is a national priority for Botswana. Key power generation and transmission initiatives are therefore being undertaken to ensure the realization of this goal. Government continues to carry out some major power infrastructure development projects: electrification of rural villages, network extension and reinforcement, as well as the refurbishment of the transmission and distribution network. Government has developed an integrated resource plan for the electricity sector development to drive the strategic objectives of achieving reliable, safe, and affordable electricity supply. The integrated resource plan intends to achieve an energy generation mix of at least 15% renewable energy by 2030, from the current 2%. The Botswana Energy Regulatory Authority, BERA, has issued 3 licenses for power generation to independent power producers for the first time in November 2019. While 1 was for local generation, 2 were for electricity exports. The refurbishment of the Morupula A 132 megawatt power station was successfully completed in February 2020, while the Morupula B power station is undergoing comprehensive defects remedial works scheduled for completion by 2023. The remediation of the first unit, initially scheduled to be in operation in the first quarter of 2020, is at 90% completion and is expected to be commissioned by June 2021. Another noteworthy initiative is the Northwest Transmission Grid Connection Project that seeks to connect the Northwest and Khansi districts, is at 92% completion and it is scheduled for commissioning in December 2020. Upon completion, this project will significantly reduce the power imports bill from cross-border supply and provide reliable grid power to mining operations in the region. Government continues to electrify villages under the Rural Village Electrification Program, bringing the total of rural electrification progress to 88%, with 435 out of a total of 498 gazetted villages in the country electrified. The current national access to electricity stands at 64%. The electrification of 15 villages, more villages, namely Kedia, Sepako, Tsokotsa, Kere, Madingwana, Sankuyo, Mababe, Kwening, Tsetseng, Lologani, Jamataka, Kanye, Tsotsakalfontein, Litlakeng, Mabutsani will be completed by December 2020, increasing the total number of villages electrified to 90%. The Rural Electrification Program is implemented fully by citizen consultants and contractors in accordance with government citizen economic empowerment and economic diversification drive policies. The total amount spent is over 2 billion pula on projects such as the Rural Electrification Program and the Northwest Transmission. BPC has incubated over 60 citizen-owned companies for the construction and maintenance of distribution infrastructure. Supply of petroleum products. Mr. Speaker, the recent fuel shortages which occurred in Botswana as a result of supply chain challenges occasioned by COVID-19 have highlighted Botswana's overdependence on fuel imports on a single source of supply. In this regard, government has identified alternative routes, sources of supply, which will significantly increase the security of fuel supply to the country. Government is also exploring other options to improve fuel supply security by developing a coal-to-liquids project, which is at feasibility stage and is expected to be completed during the course of 2021. To further ensure national security of fuel supply, additional strategic fuel storage facilities are being developed through Botswana Oil in Khantsi, in Francistown, and Telehill in the Gauteng district. Tourism. Mr. Speaker, government has revised the tourism policy and it will be presented during this sitting of Parliament. The overall objective of the policy is to facilitate product diversification, promote domestic tourism, increase citizen and local community participation in the development of the sector. In order to increase meaningful citizen participation in the growth and development of the tourism industry, government has taken the decision to reserve 5 concessions in the Okavango Delta to be allocated to 100% citizen and citizen-owned companies, consortia, and joint venture partnerships. Government launched the Tourism Information Licensing System, TOLIS, in January 2020 for the licensing and revenue collection from licensed operations. The system offers a platform to apply for tourism licenses, pay license fees, penalties, and the training levy fee online, thereby improving the ease of doing business. Government has restored the 80-year-old Matapana Bridge in Maung in recognition of local heritage. The Community Trust has taken over the management of the bridge for tourism activities. The Kalahadi Heritage Trail was also launched to highlight and celebrate over 30 key cultural and natural heritage sites for tourism. Communities have been engaged to strengthen 4 mini trails at Boravast, Hakibana, Tsamama, and 4 Hooks. The ongoing management plan for the Tuihaba Caves and wider NG4 seeks to explore further developments in the area, with the caves as the main tourist attraction. These and Sodilo will be leased to Botswana and will commence operations by June 2021. The above notwithstanding, COVID-19 pandemic has reversed the gains previously made in the tourism sector. By the end of April 2020, it was estimated that 90.7% of all tourism enterprises had closed, with only 9.3% still open primarily for periodic quarantine purposes. In response to these challenges, government has made a decision to extend the wage subsidy support to all licensed tourism enterprises for a period of 6 months, beginning July to December 2020, and to pay wage subsidies to freelance personnel in the tourism sector that were not covered in the initial wage subsidy of April to June 2020. As at current, all tourism categories have been open to conduct businesses. Transport sector, roads. Mr. Speaker, Botswana's 20,000 kilometers road network is worth 50 billion pula. The development and maintenance of our road network is pivotal to the socio-economic development of our country, as it creates networks for the movement of goods, services, and people, as well as linking our country with others in the region. Government is therefore undertaking rapid road development projects across the country and continues to reserve maintenance works for 100% citizen-owned companies. Government is still committed to construct the following roads: Francistown, Nata, Maung, Sihitwa, Mohembo, some sections of the Nata-Kazungula Road, and the Palape Martins Drift Road. These roads link Botswana with Central Africa, as we anticipate the increase in freight transport due to the completion of the Kazungula Bridge and the coming into effect of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement in January 2021. 2 major bridges are being constructed in the tourist areas of Ngamiland and Chobe districts. The Kazungula Bridge project the government has completed in collaboration with the Republic of Zambia. The bridge will improve the efficiency of transit traffic at the Kazungula border, enable regional connectivity of the North-South carrier, as well as facilitate regional integration of the SADC economies. Furthermore, the bridges will provide connectivity to planned major road projects, namely the Francistown, Nata, Nata Maung, Nata Kasani, and Orapa Maung and Maung Shakawe roads. The Ogovango Bridge in Mohembo village, which is under construction, will be completed in August 2021. Nearly 500 Botswana have been employed at this project. The project is fully funded by the government of Botswana. Other ongoing road projects include Charles Hill to Ngujani, Gaborone Boatle, Dibiti Mokane Machaning, Mabela Pudi, Timoyapula, Serule, and Musu Talamabel. Progress on the new Greater Gaborone traffic signaling system modernization and provision of centralized traffic control projects stands at 30% against the planned 35%. To date, 31 out of 129 intersections have been commissioned. Construction of the 3 interchanges along the Western Bypass Road, which started in December 2019, is ongoing. Rail transport. Mr. Speaker, in order to unlock the connectivity of our country, Botswana Railways is embarking on 2 key strategic rail infrastructure projects for Masisi to Kazungula rail line and Mamabula to Lephalale. The Mamabula-Lephalale line will connect to the South African railway network, while the Masisi-Kazungula rail line connects to the Zambian railway network. The feasibility studies for 2 projects are scheduled to commence between the end of the current financial year and are expected to be completed by September 2021. Aviation. Mr. Speaker, the aviation sector plays a key role in growing the economy of a country. However, due to the current restrictions on travel, it has not been performing as expected. Botswana is embarking on the development of the aviation infrastructure to ready herself for international travel. It is for this reason that the international airport in Maung is being refurbished and will be completed during this financial year. So far, the new domestic and international arrival halls have been completed and handed over to Civil Aviation Authority of Botswana in July 2020. The introduction of long-haul flights into Botswana, including Qatar, and Ethiopian Airlines, as well as regional operators such as Namib Air, SA Express, and SA Airlink, requires an urgent review of the aviation and airspace safety and security, as well as disaster preparedness. Another airline which has expressed interest to fly into Botswana is Emirates Airlines. To this end, the improvement of surveillance coverage of Botswana's airspace has commenced, and tender in this regard will be awarded in May 2021. Promoting digitization. Mr. Speaker, as a result of our continued efforts, we have adopted the Smart Botswana strategy, or Smart Botswana, BOTS, that is now in the implementation stage. Smart BOTS, adopting a whole-of-government approach to transform the public sector and thus enable us to efficiently provide service to citizens and businesses. As I have stated before, our commitment to achieving the fourth industrial revolution is demonstrated by, among others, our inclusion in the World Economic Forum's 2030 Vision Leaders for platform, the partnerships that we continue to form with global leaders and international high-tech companies will assist Botswana in her drive to achieve a digital economy and her transformational agenda. To this end, I have offered Botswana to partner with global leading companies and organizations so we become a living laboratory for the fourth industrial revolution. The Maun Science Park could well be a part of this if ongoing consultations are successful. National backbone infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, our quest to upgrade the national backbone network to a state-of-the-art infrastructure is in progress. To date, Bofinet has a national fiber coverage in excess of 10,600 kilometers countrywide, and it is in the process of connecting cities, major towns, and villages, which will also reduce the digital divide in the country. In this regard, 206 out of 399 localities are connected to high-speed open access network infrastructure. 193 villages, however, still require open access broadband backbone network connectivity. More than 20 villages across the country will be provided with broadband connectivity through optic fibers. These villages are Kang, Tsane, Lihututu, Hukuntsi, Lokwabe, Letlakeng, Kudimelajwe, Sorlatholo, Salajwe, Kaudwane, Takatokwane, Make, Gwate, Monong, Ngang, Ukwi, Ngujane, Gole, Makunda, and Charles Hill. Of these, Kang, Tsane, Hukunzi, and Lihututu have recently completed and launched, whereas Charles Hill, Monong, Ngang, and Gwate are at 98% progress and will be completed at the end of November 2020. Letlakeng to Kaudwane, covering Sorlatholo and Letlakeng, are at 97% and will also be completed by the end of November 2020. In addition, all villages with a population of less than 5,000 people will be connected using high-capacity radios instead of fiber optic by the end of NDP 11. E-services. Botswana aims to pursue a digitally inclusive nation through the implementation of the digital transformation agenda. Thus, the increase in demand for e-services over the past few years has demonstrated the centrality of digitization and advanced technologies in our quest to transform and diversify the economy of our country. To this end, major initiatives have been introduced aimed at improving the delivery of quality services through digitization in different sectors as follows. E-minerals. The Botswana Geoscience Institute has developed access to the mineral exploration borehole information system to facilitate the sharing of borehole data that covers water table, yield, depth, and chemistry. This system will be availed to the public by the end of the current financial year. E-health. Mr. Speaker, the health sector has successfully launched the e-health strategy for 2020 to 2024 in March of 2020. The strategy will improve access to health care, better patient outcomes, access to health information, as well as monitoring and evaluation. To this end, the development of a homegrown centralized electronic medical record, EMR, system is in progress, developed here. It is envisaged that upon completion, the system will replace the use of paper-based medical patient cards and assist in building an electronic health record. E-learning. Mr. Speaker, the need for digital platforms in teaching and learning has taken precedence in delivering the 21st century learner and transitioning Botswana to a knowledge-based economy. Government continues to partner with stakeholders to support school connectivity and the provision of ICT gadgets. Capacity building of teachers in ICT is ongoing. To date, more than 3,300 teachers have been trained. The development of a content platform to facilitate access to digital education is ongoing, and it will be completed by the end of 2021-2022 financial year. E-commerce. Mr. Speaker, government is in the process of developing a national e-commerce strategy which will facilitate commerce across all sectors of the economy. The project commenced in 2019 and it is scheduled to be completed by March 2021. Our National Payment System Vision and Strategy 2020-2024 is designed to promote and the use of digital payments platforms. The NPSS, which is the National Payment Systems Vision Strategy, is expected to accelerate financial inclusion and support the growth of the digital economy. The financial sector is also at the forefront of digitization of our economy. Banks have continued to roll out digital products and services. To date, the number of transactions conducted through electronic funds transfer, or EFTs, has increased by 7% compared to the previous year, while the number of points of sale, or swiping transactions, increased by 13%. The use of checks dropped by 33% over the same period. Botswana Post has launched an online service, Poso Money, to help achieve financial inclusion for the unbanked and the underbanked, as well as generate an additional revenue stream to sustain itself. Poso Money is a mobile money solution that allows customers to access a wide range of financial products and services. There are currently 66,000 registered users on this platform. During the current financial year, the Botswana Unified Revenue Services, BERS, commenced the project of upgrading a number of ports of entry into one-stop border posts. These include Ramokgwebana, Mamuno, Tlokweng, and Pioneer border posts to improve clearance of cargo and facilitate the ease of doing business. The upgrading commenced in April 2020 and will be completed by March 2023. Ports of entry. The automation of ports of entry will enhance compliance with the requirements of the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, and ensure efficient service delivery, as well as validate the authenticity and integrity of e-passports of member states. To this end, government is carrying out the installation of the passport and border control system at the remaining 6 ports of entry, being 2 Rivers, Boxpits, Makopong, Parsholt, Zanzibar, and Mabulwe, which will be completed by end of March 2021. Government has also started the development of the visa online application platform, which is expected to be completed by May 2021. In addition, government will develop the platform for online application for the Botswana passport in the next financial year. Broadcasting services. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, government has started live parliamentary debates in an endeavor to take parliament closer to the people. In order to disseminate information to the youth, a channel, Now TV, was launched in November 2019 and is available online. Government continues to provide universal access to broadcast and print media services. A new transmitter has been installed to enable access to broadcast services to a total of 8,443 people residing in Sojwe, Shadi, Lepepe, Otse, Boatlaname, Kokonje, and Leolohan. 3 transmitters will be commissioned at Salajwe, Takatukwani, Malwelwe before the end of the current financial year, resulting in an additional 18,652 people in 33 villages with access to broadcast signals. GAB's free Wi-Fi. As part of its efforts to expand access to the broadband internet services, government and the private sector have started rolling out the fiber to the business and fiber to the home project in Gaborone. The GAB's free Wi-Fi initiative, which was launched last month, intends to provide free and daily Wi-Fi for 1 hour per user in some public areas in Gaborone. The first phase of this project entails the installation of Wi-Fi hotspots in 10 public spaces in the city of Gaborone. These places were selected because they have already been provided with the requisite infrastructure in the form of fiber networks. This service will be extended to other parts throughout Botswana in due course. Internet Protocol TV. We made a promise to nurture the creative economy to make it a source of economic growth, job creation, innovation and trade, as well as to expose our arts and diverse cultures to international markets. Through Bofinet, government has created a digital content platform that will showcase Botswana storytelling and entertainment through an Internet Protocol Television, IPTV service. The IPTV platform will be a significant contributor towards the commercialization of the creative and arts industry, as outlined in our country's creative industry strategy. It's the Botswana equivalent of Netflix. Research and innovation. Mr. Speaker, government through the Botswana Institute of Technology Research and Innovation, or BITRI, has established a software development center which will enhance Botswana's participation in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The center develops core and backbone platforms across national economic sectors and accompanying applications, programming interfaces to allow seamless integration with applications from other developers. Social upliftment. Mr. Speaker, beginning with social protection, the recently approved National Social Protection Framework, NDPF, will deliver a single registry system with the aim of consolidating and harmonizing the existing 29 social protection programs across government into 5 life course programs. The consolidation will forge coherence and synergies between these programs to assist government in building a stronger, more responsive, efficient, and resilient social protection system. Government continues to provide care for the less privileged persons through the social protection program, including the old age pensioners, destitute persons, orphan and vulnerable children, community home-based care patients, World War II veterans, people living with disabilities, and needy students. As at September 2020, a total of 229,622 beneficiaries were registered under various programs. The Ipelehem program will be re-engineered with focus on maintenance of public facilities, especially schools, and implementation of development projects at the local level. The revamped Ipelehem will empower beneficiaries through capacity building and development of technical skills for sustained livelihoods. Their training will be conducted in partnership with local institutions, including Material Training and Testing Center, Construction Industry Trust Fund, and brigades across Botswana. Poverty eradication, Mr. Speaker. Poverty eradication is one of the government's key policy deliverables. In this context, we have broadened the scope of measurement of poverty to include the Multidimensional Poverty Index, MPI, which measures non-income deprivation levels of the poor in the areas of education, health, and living standards. Under the Poverty Eradication Program, as of July 2020, 39,971 projects were funded. Out of these, 31,829, or 80%, are operational, employing 34,791 Botswana, while 2,286 projects were not successful, resulting in a 5.7% failure rate since inception of the program. About 5,856 projects are at different stages of implementation. People living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, government continues to mainstream disability in all its development programs with a view to improve the lives of people living with disability, as well as to remove barriers and ensure their full participation in the socio-economic development of our country. Children living with disability are provided with diagnostic assessment through multidisciplinary teams comprising educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, and low vision specialists to guide in the appropriate placement of learners with special needs. The construction of a center for severe and multiple disability in Maung to cater for learners with disabilities commenced in February 2020 and is scheduled for completion in February 2022. As of March 2020, the government unemployed graduate database has registered a total of 296 graduates with disability, of which 143 were placed at different government departments, representing 48% placement. It is important to know that graduates with disabilities were given priority. Government has also revised the land policy to ensure that people living with disability are prioritized in the allocation of land. Gender equality. Mr. Speaker, gender equality and empowerment of women remains central to the socio-economic and cultural development of Botswana, as espoused in our National Vision 2036. Government has set up structures such as the National Gender Commission, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the District Gender Committees to bridge the gap on gender equality. The Women Economic Empowerment Program, which aims to strengthen the participation of women in the national economic activities, is under review. The prevalence of gender-based violence, especially violence against women and children, who are the most vulnerable to this crime, is of serious concern to all of us. Government has therefore prioritized drafting of a sexual offenders bill to be tabled during this sitting of Parliament. The bill will establish a sex offenders registry to record and publicize names and particulars of all persons convicted of sexual offenses. To date, 12 districts have set up the district gender committees in Chobe, Kweneng, Katleng, Kalahari, Maung, Seroes, Lipikwe, Northeast, Bubirwa sub-districts, Mabutsane sub-district, Good Hope sub-district, and Mahalape sub-district. These committees will promote gender equality and women's empowerment, as well as address gender-based violence. I am delighted to announce that subsequent to my address to the nation on gender-based violence in September of 2020, the Botswana Police has taken swift action and introduced a toll-free number for reports on gender-based violence. The police will also establish a gender and child protection unit by April 2021. Government is currently putting in place appropriate structures to strengthen its response to GBV. Rural development. Mr. Speaker, the Rural Development Council has adopted a value chain approach as a tool to transform community projects into business entities. These community-driven initiatives are anchored on the use of a natural resource base that predominantly exists in rural areas to create wealth for the rural economies. The RDC intends to replicate successful business initiatives in other parts of the country. You will recall that I recently declared this year, 2020, a non-drought year, following the annual drought and household food security vulnerability assessment conducted in June 2020. However, there are pockets of the country that were affected by the drought and therefore need targeted relief measures. These measures include an 85% seasonal loan payout to farmers in the seriously affected areas in the Northeast and the Northwest districts, Buteti and Bubirwa sub-districts, the Tsopong areas, and in the Mahalape and Palape sub-district, as well as Tutume and Tonota sub-districts. Farmers in those areas obtained seasonal loans from the Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency, CEDA, and the National Development Bank through the Agricultural Credit Guarantee Scheme to supplement the complete crop failure as was determined at the time of the assessment. Other interventions were a 20% livestock subsidy for the entire country, the continuation of supplementary feeding at primary schools and health facilities, provision of special food basket to underweight children residing in areas serviced by mobile health stops, and continuation of the implementation of basic food relief packages to deserving residents in the affected districts. These interventions have been effected and are to end on the 30th June 2021, save for the livestock feed subsidy, which started in 1st September 2020 and will end on 1st January 2021. The RDC will continue to monitor implementation of these relief measures to ensure their effectiveness. Local economic development. The local economic development strategy is an effective instrument to promote local investment, sustain economic growth and diversification, and enhance sustainable livelihoods across localities. Following the approval of the National LED Framework, government has been focusing on assisting local authorities to develop LED strategies. So far, one of the 5 targeted districts has completed its strategy, while the remaining 4 are at various stages of development. It is anticipated that all the strategies will be completed by the end of this financial year. Bogosi. Mr. Speaker, the Bogosi institution plays a pivotal role in nation building. However, Bogosi succession disputes continue to negatively affect decision-making and service delivery. Government is concerned with the increasing involvement of politicians in Bogosi and the use of this sacred institution for pursuing political agendas. I therefore urge our traditional leadership and Botswana alike to jealously guard this important institution which has served us well over the years. Government continues to engage with the Khosi through various platforms to address these challenges going forward. Government is also making concerted efforts to improve the state of customary courts and khotla offices. To this end, the refurbishment of 11 customary courts were completed by September 2020. Furthermore, Wi-Fi connectivity for 50 khotla offices across the country is ongoing and is expected to be completed by March 2021. The initiative will provide access to Wi-Fi services to communities of these areas, providing yet another opportunity for youth businesses to grow. Adequate and affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to providing housing, particularly targeting the low-income strata of the society and first-time buyers. Government is working with stakeholders, including the Botswana Housing Corporation, to promote high-density housing, especially in urban areas where there's a shortage of land. BHC continues to provide housing and has recently been able to deliver houses in Palape, Tutume, and Tatisaidi. Since the beginning of NDP 11, 1,333 units out of the targeted 1,972 have been completed. The construction of the remaining units is expected to be completed by the end of this financial year. Government is reviewing the national policy on housing to improve housing delivery and promote home ownership. The review of this policy is expected to be completed by the end of 2021-2022 financial year. The revamping of the Integrated Poverty Alleviation and Housing Scheme initiative, which targets lower-income groups, is expected to be completed by the end of 2021-2022 financial year. Land. Mr. Speaker, land is an important resource that we must jealously guard. It is our heritage, and selling it should be discouraged for the benefit of our future generations. My government is worried by the disempowering effect where citizens sell tribal land. The government strives to improve Botswana by reforming our land tenure policies. The initiative undertaken by government to promote mixed land use has helped our people to repurpose their land for advantageous economic activities. Government has embarked on a land management reform agenda that aims at the transformation of the land sector with particular emphasis on speedy and efficient land allocation, which will reduce the numbers on the waiting lists and the turnaround time for land allocations. The reform is expected to be completed by April 2021. Mr. Speaker, government continues to undertake land servicing projects to facilitate land allocation and development. In most of the layouts, plots have already been allocated and developed ahead of servicing. Projects that are being undertaken during this financial year include Lintsuletau, Lesoma Kazungula, Metsimotlhabe, Mabutsane, Francistown, Gerald Block 1, Kalamara and Moshopa. These projects are expected to provide access to a total of 9,729 plots by March 2022. However, owing to capacity constraints, government is actively considering leveraging on the local private sector through public-private partnerships, PPP, to service land and significantly reduce the waiting lists for land allocations nationally. Furthermore, we are considering plot allocations on unserviced or minimally serviced land. Land use planning and management. Mr. Speaker, in the past year, government adopted several planning initiatives, such as the declaration of planning areas, namely the Southeast, Gauteng and Chobe district, as well as the Palape and Bobiro sub-districts. Government aims to declare all districts as planning areas by March 2021. Government has also completed the development plans for Soa, Serowe, Kanye, and Molepolole, and the revitalization plans for Selibe Pikwe, Kasane, Kazungula, Lobatse, and Francistown. The Land Administration Procedures Capacity and Systems, LAPCAS, project was to provide technological solutions for effective management of land. As part of the LAPCAS initiative, government will establish a national spatial data infrastructure by 2023, which will allow for geospatial data sharing. The availability of the NSDI is expected to contribute to the digital government transformation, Smart Botswana, and also enhance the implementation of the National Spatial Plan. Water and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that the prevention of the spread and transmission of COVID-19 requires hygiene, consequently making the availability of water supply to all households critical. Government has instituted measures including the provision of additional capacity for supplementary housing to areas with critical water shortages and an additional 41 ungazetted settlements, the reconnection of all customers with outstanding bills, and the suspension of water disconnection countrywide, all these done with a view to maintain a continuous supply of water throughout the country as part of the state of emergency. In the last 2 years, government has been successful in efforts to provide water to the people. While short-term water projects are being put in place, government is at the same time implementing medium to long-term projects like the development of the Botswana Water Security Strategy for 2020 to 2024 to ensure reliability and consistency of water supply. The development of the strategy is expected to be completed by the end of this financial year. Major investment in water and sanitation infrastructure, which includes the design and construction of the Maung Water Supply and Sanitation Scheme, is planned to be completed in 2022. The scheme is envisaged to provide potable water and sanitation networks to benefit the localities of Sekaqa, Mataudi, Sekampani, and Shorobe. In the southern part of the country, we have commenced the construction of the Masama-Mamashia 100-kilometer pipeline, which will inject an additional 64 million cubic liters of water per day into the Greater Gaborone, Lobatse, Kanyara, Motsomolepole, and Borlong areas. The project is expected to be completed by May 2021. Other significant water projects which are ongoing include the Mahalape and Palape water treatment works, scheduled for completion in December 2021. The Palape treatment plant will benefit Palape and Seruwe. The Mahalape treatment plant will benefit Mahalape and the Shoshong cluster, covering Shoshong, Bonapitsi, Mutlani, and Kalamari, as well as 21 villages in the Tswapong South area. Tswapong South villages include Sefare cluster, which covers Machaning, Borotsi, Chadibe, and Maifala, the Pilikwe cluster covering Pilikwe and Mahalapita and Mukobeng, Mwapa cluster covering Ramukonami, Mukobeng, Mwapa, Pilikwe, as well as the Matlako Lotoreng cluster. Litoreng, sorry. Government is also constructing a water treatment plant in Kasane. The project is scheduled to be completed in March 2023 and will benefit Kasane, Kazungula, Lesoma, and the Chobe Enclave villages. Projects under the World Bank supported program include the Northeast Tutome water supply project, which entails upgrading and remedial works of schemes in 52 villages in the 2 districts. The Northeast Tutome water supply project is scheduled to be completed by August 2021. Projects that were awarded in September 2020 include the next phase of the North-South Carrier project under the Mamashia-Gaborone pipeline and the Gaborone Water Master Plan, Moshopa Sanitation Project, Lobatse Water Master Plan, the connection of Tsopon South villages to the North-South Carrier at Mahalape, and the Mamashia Water Treatment Plant expansion. Mr. Speaker, this phase of the North-South Carrier project involves the development of additional infrastructure to allow for the transmission of raw water, the upgrading of the existing Gaborone water supply network, as well as the connection of new developing areas of Gaborone North, Sibili, the Sasrazakama International Airport Development Area, and the Forest Hill Development. The project will benefit localities such as Odi, Mudipani, and Matebeli. The Molepolole Gamononyani North-South Carrier Connection and Good Hope Water Master Plan, Phase 2, are currently at procurement stage. The Gamononyane Molepole project will benefit Molepolole, Kopong, Manoko, Gamudubu, and Tebepatswa Air Base. The Good Hope project involves the transmission and distribution systems covering 32 villages from Pitsane to Sukutlani. Furthermore, the Ramotswa water treatment plant is scheduled to be completed in December 2020 and will benefit the Ramotswa cluster villages. The connection of the Ramonedi wellfield to Matiti is ongoing and is expected to be completed by December 2020. The project will address the shortage of water in the village as a short-term measure while awaiting the implementation of the Metlojani Matiti World Bank project. The Gumare water treatment plant is scheduled to be completed by January 2021, and it is designed to service the villages of Gumare, Tubu, Eta 1 and Eta 6. The Shakawe water treatment plant is also ongoing, and it is scheduled for completion in February 2021. The project entails rehabilitation of the existing treatment plant to increase treated water capacity to meet the increasing demand for the villages of Shakawe, Ngamasere, Samuchima, Mohembo West, Ukusi, Shaikarawe, and Kauwa. Kuaga, Kiwasentlekeni, in the Okavango sub-district until 2035. The rehabilitation of the Glen Valley wastewater treatment plant is scheduled to be completed by December 2020. The project involves the upgrading of wastewater treatment processes and the rehabilitation and maintenance of existing wastewater facilities to improve plant efficiency and compliance to environmental discharge protocols, which will also reduce odor. The feasibility study for the implementation of the Glen Valley wastewater reclamation project through a public-private partnership has also been concluded. The project involves the development of infrastructure for recycling wastewater for potable use. Basic education, early childhood education. Mr. Speaker, since the implementation of the early childhood education program, the number of public primary schools offering the one-year reception class program has increased from 590 schools to 613 as at March 2020. This program will be extended to all the remaining 143 primary schools by 2022. The shortage of learning materials and infrastructure are the main challenges for the early childhood program. To alleviate the challenges, government provides grants to centers, playgroups, and daycare centers owned by communities and non-government organizations to assist children who are unable to benefit from the government program. In this context, government partnered with 30 centers during this financial year. Outcome-based education syllabus system at senior secondary schools. In order to improve the quality of our education, Botswana has adopted an outcome-based approach to education to facilitate the introduction of multiple pathways starting 2021 at senior secondary schools to enable students to pursue subjects of their interest and capability. Over the last 2 years, there has been a rapid implementation of reform programs under the Education and Training Sector Strategic Plan, with a view to promote a competence or skill-based curriculum, and as such, 38 subjects have been reviewed and developed. So far, Mount Senior Secondary School has been selected for tourism and hospitality, while Moyeng College was identified for horticulture, crop and animal production. The construction of facilities to prepare the schools for pathways has already commenced. Assessment programs aligned to the new curriculum are being developed and are expected to be completed in by 2023. Syllabus development will commence from October 2020 to March 2022 for junior secondary schools, and from November 2022 to April 2024 for primary schools, while for pre-primary it will be November 2024 to April 2026. In this context, a draft national policy on assessment for general education, as well as the technical and vocational education and training, has been completed and will guide examinations and assessment in the context of outcome-based education. The Botswana Teaching Professional Council has been established to professionalize the teaching cadre and restore dignity of the profession. Development projects, Mr. Speaker. Provision of quality education cannot be realized without a conducive teaching and learning environment. In this regard, government has recently made rigorous efforts which led to the completion of 30 schools under cyclic maintenance, while 22 are ongoing at various stages of completion. 31 projects are yet to commence and will be implemented in the remaining years of NDP 11. Under the expansion of junior secondary schools, 4 schools, namely Tsodilo, Maunatala, Tsoragano, and Silolwane junior secondary schools have been completed, while Mpute Junior Secondary School is at completion stage. Government has also delivered 156 out of 191 targeted classrooms and 37 out of 54 science labs. The remaining 35 classrooms and 17 science labs are ongoing and expected to be handed over by the end of November 2020. The expansion of Gold Mine and Bonwatlo Junior Secondary Schools is expected to complete during this financial year, while the plan for the expansion for Kalamari Junior Secondary School is at design stage. In terms of accommodation provision for teachers, 454 staff houses were constructed across the country, while another 301 units were procured from the Botswana Housing Corporation. Tenders for the provision of 412 porter camp classrooms across the country are still at evaluation stage. Pardon. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 in schools. The outbreak of COVID-19 has caused substantial disruptions within the education landscape of our country. The closure of schools and the interruption of curriculum delivery across learning institutions has demanded robust plans to ensure continuity in the delivery of teaching and learning without compromising the quality of education and the safety of both learners and teachers. Government has ramped up efforts to counter the spread and transmission of the virus in institutions of learning. Measures undertaken to contain the spread of COVID-19 in schools include the following: reduction in class size to a maximum of 30 learners and the introduction of shifts in schools, and engagement of 3,000 temporary teachers to accommodate the increase in the number of classes, and the employment of safety, health and environment or SHE officers to ensure compliance with safety protocols. Our commitment is to maintain the status quo. To date, all public and private schools have adhered to the dictates of the COVID-19 safety protocols. The low numbers of actual COVID-19 cases across our schools is testament to the commitment of our educators to keep our schools and children safe. The primary school leaving examination was delivered successfully. The junior certificate and Botswana General Certificate of Secondary Education examinations have also begun, and it is our hope and prayer that they also will be delivered successfully. I am delighted to indicate that today, all government schools have hand wash basins, soaps, toilet papers, sanitizers, disposal bins, and water tanks. Tertiary education, Mr. Speaker. Government is currently developing a labour market information system to facilitate disaggregation of education and employment statistics through linkages with other databases, including the integrated system for civil registration, migration and citizenship, labour administration, national employment service systems, as well as the government unemployed graduate database. Government is also committed to enhancing quality assurance in our education system, and to this end, all institutions of higher learning in Botswana have been registered with the Botswana Qualifications Authority. This was followed by a comprehensive review of technical and vocational education and training programs in line with the National Human Resource Development Plan and the National Credit and Qualifications Framework. Libraries. Government is committed to increasing literacy in the country. In this regard, we continue to collaborate with stakeholders such as the Robert and Sarah Rothschild Family Foundation, which has completed the construction of 17 libraries in the country, which are now operational. The construction of the 18th library in Reikops started in August 2020 and scheduled for completion by March 2021. Provision of quality vocational education. Mr. Speaker, the maintenance of brigade institutions is ongoing, with 4 brigades funded and completed in the last financial year, while maintenance for 12 are ongoing. The procurement of modern workshop equipment for brigade institutions and certificate offering technical colleges is at an advanced stage. Tenders for various equipment have been floated and at various stages of the procurement process. As government has promised to rapidly diversify our economy, Construction Industry Trust Fund has commenced the development of learning programs for road maintenance, fence erection and maintenance, furniture making and alternative building solutions. The establishment of the Sodre, Boxpits, Pitane Molopo and Ngojane Rapid Skill Centers has commenced. The establishment of Shakawe and Kakia Centers will commence in the next financial year. The Senyawe, Nkange and Naledi brigades were handed over to CITF in September 2020, and the accreditation has started, after which training will commence. These efforts are a true demonstration of this government's commitment to economic diversification and our objective of improving the lives of our people, especially the youth. Sports and culture development. Mr. Speaker, as I have repeatedly expressed, the creative industry holds great potential to improving the lives of our people and significantly contributing to employment creation and the development of this country. In recognition of this, a bill to establish the National Arts Council for effective regulation and coordination of the arts and culture sector was passed in September 2020. The council is expected to be in place by the beginning of the next financial year. To further optimize on the potential of the creative industry, the Cinematograph Act is being reviewed to strengthen the local film and television industry. The drafting of the bill is expected to be completed by the end of this financial year. In addition, government has developed the creative industry strategy with a view to promote creativity, nurture skills and talents for jobs and wealth creation, particularly for our young people. The National Sports Commission Act is also being reviewed to facilitate sport to contribute to the economy through commercialization and professionalism, as well as improve the welfare of the rights of our sports persons. The Youth Development Fund is currently being reviewed to assess impact and identify gaps in its implementation. The Botswana National Youth Policy is also being reviewed to incorporate emerging issues in the youth development space, such as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Both reviews are targeted for completion by March 2021. To alleviate the impact of COVID-19 on sport and the creative industry, government offered a financial relief program for artists and athletes. By September 2020, a total of 19,404,180 pula has been paid to youth, athletes and artists to help them cope with the effects of COVID-19. 340 youth received 1,528,250 pula, 9,090 artists. So 9,090. Artists received 9,090 artists received 14,308,508 pula, while 889 athletes received 3,567,430 pula of the relief package. Mr. Speaker, I note with sadness that many sport and cultural activities for 2020 were either postponed or cancelled due to COVID-19. These include the Kawa June Challenge and cultural activities, festivals, the 1000 Kalahari Desert Race, the President's Day competitions, constituency sports and art competitions, and other sporting activities such as football competitions and the leagues. I wish to indicate, however, that the postponement and cancellations were necessary for the protection of our people. Health and wellness. Mr. Speaker, let me emphasize this government's unwavering commitment to ensuring the highest standard of health for our people. Thus, through the revised National Health Policy, government is pursuing the delivery of quality universal healthcare services with the objective of attaining health for all by 2036. The policy is consistent with the commitment of ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for people of all ages, in line with Sustainable Development Goal 3. HIV/AIDS. Mr. Speaker, Botswana has made tremendous efforts in tackling the HIV/AIDS pandemic in the country. As such, the country has surpassed the UNAIDS 90-90-90 targets in 2019 and has now set new targets to 95-95-95. Currently, 92% of people living with HIV know their status, while 89% of them are on treatment, with 96% being virally suppressed. To date, 384,110 people in Botswana are estimated to be living with HIV. However, HIV/AIDS-related deaths have declined by 28% between the years 2010 and 2019. It is also worth noting that the country is on the path to eliminating mother-to-child transmission. It currently stands at 1.9% when compared to 2.5% in 2018. In December 2019, the government, in collaboration with PEPFAR, adopted a policy on providing free HIV/AIDS services to non-citizens living in Botswana. To date, there are over 2,965 non-citizens accessing antiretroviral treatment services for free. Well, free to them. In order to further reduce new HIV infections, government has introduced pre-exposure prophylaxis to HIV-negative individuals who are 18 years old and above and at risk of acquiring the infection. The pre-exposure prophylaxis is already being rolled out in phases to prioritize beneficiaries such as adolescent girls and young women. Malaria. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the significant progress made towards achieving the elimination of malaria in the country, I wish to note with concern that at the beginning of the malaria transmission season in October 2019, a total of 936 cases were registered, out of which 11 led to deaths, surpassing the transmission rate of 585 cases recorded in 2018 during the same period. Government, however, remains steadfast in efforts to eliminate malaria. Alcohol and substance abuse. Mr. Speaker, alcohol and substance abuse remain a matter of concern to our nation, and there's an increasing need for treatment of those affected. To address the challenges, the draft National Health Rehabilitation Policy is being developed. In addition, the design and review process to convert an existing facility to a specialized health rehabilitation center in Francistown is ongoing. The center will treat individuals with trauma and neurological conditions. Emergency medical services. In order to reduce deaths and injury from road traffic accidents, emergency medical services, EMS, units were established to provide life-saving out-of-hospital medical care and transportation of patients to definitive care. As part of the implementation of the EMS policy, the service deals with time-sensitive health conditions. In the implementation of the EMS policy, government has to date established 9 EMS centers at Gaborone, Lubatse, Muchudi, Mahalape, Palape, Silibe Pikwe, Francistown, Maung, and Kasane. Plans are underway to roll out the service to other areas, particularly in Molepolole, Jwaneng, and Khanti. As a long-term strategy, government will establish a centralized national EMS call center where all emergency calls and dispatches will be coordinated. The Botswana Public Health Institute. It is the intention of the government to establish the Botswana Public Health Institute. The institute will help Botswana develop, strengthen, and maintain her capabilities to detect, access, notify, and report events deemed to present public health risk and public health emergencies. COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the index case of COVID-19 in the country was recorded on the 31st March 2020. As at the 1st of November 2020, a cumulative 6,441 Botswana had tested positive, with 880 active cases, while 5,534 people had recovered from the virus. To date, Botswana has recorded 27 COVID-related deaths. In order to contain the spread and transmission of the virus, a presidential COVID-19 task force, which I chair, comprising cabinet, Diokosi scientists, health experts, the private sector, and civil society, as well as communication specialists, was established to work in collaboration with government and other stakeholders to coordinate all COVID-19 related activities. To date, a total of 2,134,557,839 pula was contributed into the COVID-19 relief fund, of which 2 billion pula was seed capital by government, and 134,557,839 pula as contributions from individuals, civil society organizations, the private sector, and development partners. In addition to the financial contribution, government received donations in kind from individuals and companies which implemented our efforts in fighting the pandemic. So far, of the 2.134 billion contributed into the relief fund, an amount of 1.844 677,264 was disbursed as follows. 1. Wage subsidy, 831,113,202 pula. 2. Food relief, 350,870,083 pula. 3. Health supplies, 396,710,434 pula. 4. Education, 58,748 pula was dispersed to the Ministry of Basic Education for the temporary employment of safety, health and environmental officers, as well as psychosocial support. 5. Support for citizens in the diaspora, 11,099,679 pula was utilized for the evacuation and financial support to Botswana abroad. And 6. Botswana Agricultural Marketing Board Strategic Grain Reserves received 196,680,098 pula was received. The balance of the fund is 289,880,575 pula, of which 200 million has been reserved for the wage subsidy for the tourism sector as approved by government in the ERTP. In recognition of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic in the medium term, government requested for a supplementary budget of 1 billion from Parliament at its last sitting, which was approved. These funds are available to finance a whole range of health supplies required to fight the disease going forward. The key aspects of the control strategy for COVID-19 include to influence behavioral change through public education, implementation of sanitary measures, enforcement of face coverings, as well as contact tracing, quarantining, and testing those exposed. In this connection, general movement restrictions were imposed on non-essential travel and gatherings. It is against this backdrop that the country has been demarcated into 9 COVID-19 zones. The extended state of public emergency, which was recently approved by Parliament, will strengthen our ability to effectively address the spread and transmission of the pandemic. In an effort to address the COVID-19 challenges, porter cabins have been set up at 6 ports of entry, being Mamuno, Martins Drift, Ramatlabama, Mokgweetsi, Kazungula, and Pioneer Gate, to facilitate testing, sample storage, and the temporary holding of suspected cases. Government has also procured and installed thermoscanners to facilitate screening at borders gates in Ramatlabama, Martins Drift, Pioneer, and Tlokweng borders. These have greatly contributed to the early detection and isolation of COVID-19 suspected cases and significantly reduced long queues. Government has further identified, maintained, or converted various facilities across the regions or zones into isolation centers to admit patients who have tested positive for COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the availability of a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19 is a critical step towards the control of the pandemic. To date, over 300 vaccine candidates across the globe are at various stages of development, 25 of which have entered clinical trials, including 9 that are in phase 3 and could achieve emergency use approval by first quarter of 2021. A COVID-19 vaccine global access facility, or the COVAX facility, was launched in April 2020 to accelerate the development and manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines and to guarantee fair and equitable access for every country in the world. As of September 2020, a total of 156 countries were reported to have joined the COVAX facility across the globe, and this includes 64 high-income countries and 92 low-income economies, representing more than 64% of the world's population. Botswana, I'm happy to say, is among the countries that have joined the COVAX facility, therefore presenting an opportunity for us to access the COVID-19 vaccine once availed. COVID-19 exposed the inadequacies of our health system to effectively deal with public health threats and emergencies. In order to deal with this challenge, the National Health Laboratory Service capacity was improved to process 5,000 tests per day against the previous 500. Improvements to build full capacity of 10,000 tests per day are ongoing. Construction of the testing laboratories at Mamuno, Kasane, and Maung are ongoing and planned for completion by the end of November 2020. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform this August House that government has lifted international travel restrictions starting from today in a phased manner, covering the 14 ports of entry as follows. Starting from today, air travel resumes at Sesradzakama International Airport in Gaborone, at Kasane International Airport, and Maung International Airport. International air travel will resume on 1st December 2020 at Philip G. Matante International Airport in Francistown. On the 1st of December 2020, ground crossing will resume at the commercial border points of Kazungula Road, Kazungula Ferry, Ngoma, Mokgweetsi, Martins Drift, Ramatlabama, Tlokwema, Muno Pioneer, and Mohembo. The remaining ports of entry are being considered subject to disease burden and harmonization of protocols with neighboring countries. We remain agile to the threat, while eager to open more borders soonest. However, all arriving travelers will be expected to meet the following requirements. 1, present a valid 72-hour negative COVID-19 polymerase chain reaction result from time of departure, PCR. 2, screened for COVID-19 symptoms upon entry. 3, symptomatic clients upon arrival will be required to undertake mandatory testing and possible isolation and/or quarantine as per Section 76, 1, 2, and 80 of the Public Health Act of 2013. 4, travelers will be required to remain in contact with the local health authority for a period of 14 days, doing so self-monitoring. 5, returning citizens and residents not meeting the requirement will undergo 14-day mandatory quarantine and testing at their own cost as assessed by local authorities. 6, non-citizen travelers not meeting the requirements will not be allowed entry into Botswana. 7, travelers exiting Botswana are expected to comply with travel regulations of the destination country at their own expense. Health infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the construction of 7 clinics and associated housing units, which commenced in the 2018-2019 financial year, is still ongoing at Makgopana in Muchudi, Toteng, Ngarange, Dikar, Dibete, Sepopa, Kautui, and with progress ranging from 12 to 97%. Moreover, government in collaboration with development partners and donors has constructed and completed clinics in Kumakwani, Lutlagane West, and Mahapatona and Tonota, in Tutume. Regarding donor-funded projects, progress stands as follows. Letlagane Maternity Ward at 90%, Borotsi at 42%, Makalamabedi at 30%, Mabwane 5%, and Molalatau 95%. With regard to the provision of accommodation, to date, a total of 75 staff houses are completed in Kalahadi, Greater Francistown, Tutome, Mabutsane, Bubirwa, Lobatse, and Kwen regions. 18 staff houses in Maung, Shorobe, and Makalamabedi are 92% complete, while the 8 houses at Tsau and Sihitwa are still at tender stage. Other planned staff houses are at various stages of construction, range from 20 to 95%. In addition, a total of 58 houses were procured from the Botswana Housing Corporation through the Public Office Housing Initiative to address an acute shortage of accommodation for health workers. The construction of 70-bed capacity primary hospitals is progressing at 95% and 25% rate in Shakawe and Moshopa, respectively. 69 staff housing units for Moshopa Hospital are also under construction at 15% progress rate, while the upgrading of Tutomen and Gumare primary hospitals is still at the design stage. The refurbishment of 3 old hospitals in Mahalape, Sefare, and Serowe Sekgoma is complete, while construction work is ongoing at the Old Maung and Scottish Livingston hospitals. These facilities will enhance service provision in the respective areas. Sustainable development. The year 2020 marks 5 years since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as the commencement of the decade of action before the end date for Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. During the 10 years, the global community committed to mobilize accelerated sustainable solutions towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and its underlying Sustainable Development Goals. However, COVID-19 proves to be the biggest setback, likely to reverse the gains of the last 5 years. As such, my government recognizes the importance of SDGs to sustain Botswana's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, thanks to their holistic nature. In order to advance SDG implementation, government, in partnership with the United Nations Family in Botswana, developed planning guidelines to effectively facilitate the integration of SDG targets and indicators into sectoral strategies and plans, as well as their effective mainstreaming into the national budgeting process. Currently, the guidelines are being piloted in 6 selected ministries. Plans are also underway to develop an SDG financing strategy to help leverage domestic, international, and private finance to support the realization of national priorities, including SDGs. Sustainable environment. Mr. Speaker, environmental sustainability is one of the key requirements for realizing sustainable development. Streamlining environmental management in our development processes is therefore of crucial importance. The amended Environmental Assessment Act will facilitate the ease of doing business, reduce the categories of projects subjected to the environmental impact assessment, and reduce the turnaround time for reviewing EIA project documents from 6 to 3 months. Climate change mitigation and adaptation. Government has completed a draft climate change and response policy, which aims to manage the effects of climate change and facilitate effective adaptation and mitigation plans. The implementation of climate change response measures will result in targeted subsidies for clean technologies such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate-smart agriculture. The draft policy will be considered in the November Parliament sitting. Renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, government continues to undertake organizational reforms to align itself with the National Vision 2036 pillar of sustainable environment to ensure that Botswana will be energy secure with diversified, safe and clean energy sources and a net energy exporter. Government has developed solar rooftop guidelines to enable Botswana to generate electricity from the sun for their own use while selling excess energy to the Botswana Power Corporation. This nationwide program is being piloted in 5 areas in Gaborone areas, namely the Okavango Diamond Company, Bank of Botswana, Airport Junction Mall, Diamond Trading Company Botswana, and Boto College, and is limited to system-wide capacity of 10 megawatts for the first 12 months of the program. 2 megawatts will be reserved for domestic consumers, while the rest for commercial use. These trials will provide government with reliable data to inform policy direction. Clean energy initiatives. In order to meet our national electricity demand in a cost-effective and environmentally friendly manner, government, through the newly approved Integrated Resource Plan, will implement the following clean technology projects. 1. 100 megawatts power plant, which is currently under procurement. The tender award to the successful bidder or bidders is expected in the first quarter of 2021, and commercial operation is scheduled for third quarter 2022. The power plant sites are located in Silibi Pikwe, 50 megawatts, and Jwaneng, 50 megawatts. 2. 12 grid-tied solar photovoltaic with a total of 35 megawatts by 2022. Tender award is scheduled for the fourth quarter of 2020, and commercial operation is scheduled for the first quarter of 2022. These projects will be at Kasane, Molepolole, Totome, Khansi, Tsabong, Maung, Serwe, Bubonong, Shakawelo, Batsim, Mamuno, and Kang. 3. 10 megawatts coal bed methane by the year 2025, which is currently undergoing procurement processes. 4. 200 megawatt concentrated solar power by by the year 2026. Procurement is scheduled to start in 2021. 5, 50 megawatts wind by the year 2027, procurement to start in 2024. And 6, 100 megawatt solar photovoltaic by the year 2027, procurement to start in 2025. Waste management. Converting waste into resourceful products will empower communities through job creation, poverty alleviation, and conservation of biodiversity resources. During the 2019-2020 financial year, waste management projects created a total of 13,267 jobs, out of which 6,129 were youth, 5,131 female, and 196 people living with disabilities. Sustainable management and natural resources. Mr. Speaker, government is working to develop an environmental management policy that promotes the protection, conservation, and harmonized coordination of the environmental-related programs and projects, the policy which is due for completion by 2021. Sustainable management of forests. Mr. Speaker, government is finalizing the 2020 Forest and Range Resources Bill, which will be submitted to Parliament in February 2021. The bill harmonizes Botswana's forest legislation with international frameworks for sustainable management of forest and veld resources. The bill will increase opportunities for Botswana in the sustainable use of range resources and open up forest reserves to communities through the establishment of ecotourism ventures. Community-based natural resources management. Mr. Speaker, hunting for the 2020 season was postponed to 2021 due to the COVID-19. In addition, the government has received support from the Federal Republic of Germany to the tune of 65,800,000 pula through the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, CASA, and Peace Parks Foundation to provide community livelihood as well as wage subsidy for the personnel employed within the community-based organization and freelance professional guides, chefs, mukoro polers within the Kaza region of Botswana. Wildlife management species. As part of economic diversification and citizen economic empowerment, government intends to broaden citizen participation in agrotourism. To this end, government is finalizing guidelines to empower our people to keep game in their fields, Masisi, which will be completed during this financial year. Government has also identified 45 new campsites in Central Harare Game Reserve, Kalahari Transfrontier Park, and Kutse Game Reserve for lease to individual citizen-owned companies and consortia. Poaching remains one of the greatest challenges in the sustainable management of our wildlife species. At least 63 rhinos have been killed since 2019. As part of the interventions to combat poaching, rhinos in the Okavango Delta have been dehorned. Government also completed the construction of the Kang anti-poaching facility in August 2020. The facility will be used for training wildlife officers responsible for anti-poaching. The National Anti-Poaching Strategy is being reviewed to strengthen measures against poaching and the illegal wildlife trafficking. It is anticipated that the review will be completed by March 2021. Mr. Speaker, government received the first reports of elephant mortality in April 2020, occurring near Soronga village in the Ngamiland district. More cases were subsequently reported in May and June. A total of 280 elephants died. However, other species, including scavengers feeding on the elephant carcasses, were not affected. Samples were sent to laboratories within the country, as well as to Zimbabwe, South Africa, United Kingdom, and the United States for testing. Investigations revealed that the animals were killed by natural cyanobacteria toxins. Government is engaged in finding ways to develop the capacity of the Department of Wildlife and National Parks to ensure preparedness and tackle such outbreaks expeditiously. In addition, we have witnessed an increase in sightings of elephants outside of the normal elephant range. Elephants were sighted as far as the Kalahari area. This expansion is exacerbated by drought and climate change. In response, government is finalizing a national elephant action plan, which will be completed during this financial year. Human-wildlife conflict continues to pose a challenge to livelihoods of Botswana. The number of lives and injuries due to human-elephant conflict in particular are a cause for concern. The construction of the Western Makgadikgadi fence has commenced and is anticipated that it will be completed by March 2021. The fence is anticipated to reduce the impact of wildlife on community livelihoods and also to serve as a disease control barrier. The Elephant Management Plan, which proposed a number of measures to mitigate conflict and address environmental impacts, will be approved during the current financial year. The compensation guidelines are undergoing review, and this process will be completed by December 2020. Governance, peace and security. Constitutional review. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to the review of our Constitution, and it will begin in earnest early next year. This is naturally a lengthy and sensitive process that will require all of us to approach it with maturity, objectivity, and a good level of tolerance. Mr. Speaker, my government strives to attain clean and open government where people, civil liberties, and human rights are upheld as espoused in our Constitution. Botswana has established a Human Rights Office with a mandate to, among others, provide strategic guidance in the promotion and protection of human rights, as well as to coordinate the implementation of recommendations by international and regional treaty bodies. This is a significant milestone in honoring our reporting obligations to the United Nations. To date, Botswana has deposited the country report on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination with the United Nations Human Rights Treaty bodies and the country report on the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in January and May 2020, respectively. Government is currently finalizing the Universal Peer Review Midterm Report, which will be deposited to the Human Rights Council by the end of 2020. In addition, the amendment of the Ombudsman Act to convert the Office of the Ombudsman into a national human rights institution is nearing completion. This amendment will empower the Office of the Ombudsman to address human rights issues. Strengthening the justice system. Mr. Speaker, the strengthening and reforming the criminal justice sector is critical to enhancing access to justice and the rule of law. In this regard, the Legal Practitioners Act is being amended to make the legal profession more responsive to the needs of the members of the public. The Legal Practitioners Bill of 2020 was tabled in the last sitting of Parliament. The jurisdiction of small claims courts, which has hitherto been limited to 10,000 pula, was increased to 30,000 pula. The small claims court will be rolled out to Palape, Jwaneng, and Maung, in addition to those in Gaborone and Francistown. Fight against corruption. Mr. Speaker, fighting corruption is fundamental to the attainment of good governance and the rule of law, as well as sustainable socio-economic development. According to the Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International, Botswana has remained constant at a score of 61% for the past 3 years. Although the country has been doing relatively well on indicators of this index, we should not be complacent. We should all ensure that corruption in the country is effectively addressed. In February 2020, government signed a memorandum of understanding with Bokongo that will help Botswana achieve international and continental obligations under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. Strengthening investigations, asset tracing and recovery. Mr. Speaker, the grey listing of Botswana by the Financial Action Task Force and the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group is a stain to Botswana's reputation, with potential to hinder national economic growth and limit to international lending institutions. The grey listing may also affect government's ability to open bank accounts in foreign jurisdictions, which are needed for both diplomatic and economic initiatives. As such, the fight against corruption needs to have real and immediate impact. To this end, government created the Anti-Money Laundering and Asset Forfeiture Unit in 2019. Through investigations of suspected money laundering and application of the Profits and Instruments of Crimes Act, PICA, Botswana may be strengthened in its deterrences and detection mechanisms of all forms of money laundering to meet the Financial Action Task Force standards. The passing of the Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Act in August 2019 for purpose of monitoring the interests, incomes, assets, and liabilities of certain categories of persons will go a long way in preventing and detecting corruption, money laundering, and the acquisition of property from proceeds of any other offense. To address the challenge of money laundering and terrorism financing, government developed several initiatives, which include conducting a sector risk assessment, sensitization of non-profit organizations, and profiling them to guide decision-making. A strategy on money laundering and financing of terrorism was developed in May of 2020 to strengthen the AML CFT systems for NPOs. Office of the Receiver. Mr. Speaker, since its establishment, the Office of the Receiver has been served with 27 court orders, of which 21 are active, while 6 have been concluded. The total value of property under the management of the receiver is 177,933,830 pula and 66 tebe, as at August 2020. Public safety and security. Mr. Speaker, on transnational crime of human trafficking, Botswana's 2019 international ratings remained at Tier 2 out of 4 possible tiers, as was the case in 2018. Botswana's achievement is commendable and is indicative of our nation's resolve to end this transnational crime, even in the face of COVID-19 pandemic. The United Nations has reported that COVID-19 will most likely exacerbate incidents of human trafficking and human smuggling worldwide. Chemical, Biological, Nuclear, and Radiological Weapons Management Authority. Mr. Speaker, the threat of terrorism has increased and diversified worldwide and cannot be ignored. To this end, Botswana ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in July 2020 to reaffirm a commitment towards global nuclear disarmament. The Botswana Defence Force. Mr. Speaker, the Botswana Defence Force continues to play an important role in maintaining the country's security and national sovereignty. And as government, we do not take their contribution for granted, for they secure our nationhood, upon which the peace dividend which we enjoy is premised. More importantly, we applaud their professionalism in executing their mandate. The Botswana Police Service. Government has deployed cutting-edge crime-fighting technology geared towards enhancing police capabilities. In particular, the closed-circuit television, CCTV, surveillance system deployed in Gaborone continues to show improvement in crime prevention and detection, especially with regard to smash and grab incidents which used to terrorize motorists around the city. The evidence retrieved from the surveillance system has proved to be effective in expediting police investigations and prosecutions. I am pleased that the installation of the cameras in Francistown is now at an advanced stage. In order to attain public safety, government has prioritized the reduction of violent and intrusive crimes, such as robberies and break-ins, as well as serious crimes like murder, rape, and threats to kill. Strategies in place yielded positive results as the country saw a decline of 4.4% in violent and intrusive crimes from 7,629 to 7,295, and a decline of 4.7% in serious crimes from 5,566 to 5,304 reported cases in 2019 against 2018. General elections. Mr. Speaker, Botswana takes democratic elections as a normative framework that enhances the credibility of the legitimacy of government. In our conduct of elections, we are guided by our Constitution and electoral laws. We are also guided by the revised SADC principles and guidelines on elections of 2015, which entail conducting elections based on shared values and principles of democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. The SADC Election Observer Mission said the elections were conducted in, and I quote, a peaceful, free, transparent, and credible manner, end quote. Although there were petitions, we allowed the due process of the law to prevail. 13 of the National Assembly petitions were dismissed by the court, while one was withdrawn by the petitioner. 5 of the local government petitions were dismissed by the court, while 3 progressed to trial but were subsequently dismissed. 1 was appealed and was unsuccessful. International relations. Mr. Speaker, turning now to our international relations, I am pleased to note that Botswana is making progress in strengthening and deepening her relations with all her development partners across the globe to advance her national development agenda. Botswana continues to cooperate with her neighbors through various bilateral mechanisms, as well as her membership to the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. In this regard, Botswana hosted Zimbabwe to the second Binational Commission in Maung in February 2020. Botswana is the current chair of the SADC Organ on Politics, Defense and Security, a position we hold until August 2021. During this time, Botswana will continue to contribute towards peace-building initiatives and consolidation of democracy, while providing leadership on peace and security issues in the region. At the continental level, Botswana continues to play an active role in advancing the transformational agenda as envisioned by Agenda 2063, by advocating for a transparent and inclusive reform process of the African Union. Botswana participated in the African Union Heads of State and Government held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in February 2020. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, Botswana, as chair of the SADC organ, facilitated the process of virtual observation of the general elections in the Seychelles and the United Republic of Tanzania successfully. On the multilateral front, our posture has been to ensure that Botswana, as a good standing member of the international community, meets her international obligations and commitments and benefits from her strategic partnerships and membership of international bodies. To this end, Botswana has had the opportunity to participate in a number of international meetings to promote and advance our national interests. These include the 9th African, Caribbean, and Pacific ACP Group Summit held in Nairobi, Kenya, which resulted in the transformation of the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific Group into the Organization of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific, OACP, and the SADC Virtual Ordinary Summit, which took place in August 2020. Mr. Speaker, Botswana also participated at the World Economic Forum in January 2020. This is part of ongoing efforts to secure multi-sectoral partnerships with a view to contribute towards economic diversification. On other international leadership roles, we have worked to enhance our representation in various regional and international organizations, such as the Economic and Social Council, the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme, the Executive Board of UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS, Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Rights, and the Executive Board of the World Health Organization. In our determined efforts to advance a coordinated foreign policy in our engagement with the international community, I am pleased to pronounce that the process of developing a foreign policy document is at a very advanced stage. Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, as I conclude, as I stated at the beginning of this address, the creation of sustainable jobs, especially for our youth, remains priority for this government. I am pleased that over the past 2 years, tremendous efforts have been made towards the provision of quality education, offering services through digitization, as well as the provision of renewable energy, which are pivotal to achieving Botswana's transformation agenda. Mr. Speaker, Botswana has a long-standing tradition of democracy, which is anchored on consultation, tolerance, and botho. The spirit of botho has bound us together as a nation, and we must ensure that no matter how we evolve as a people, we must safeguard this principle. I must hasten to add that the good name that one builds for themselves is a great legacy that cannot be diminished. Last week, I went to Shakawe to commiserate with the family of the late Honorable Mr. Vista Moruti, who has been a member of this House. I also went to Kaukui to offer condolences to the family of the late Mr. Jairus Sikokonek Ne Stoka. This was a man who built a great name for himself in his community. I was accompanied by, among others, the Honourable Member of Parliament for Okovango, Honourable Mr. Kenny Kapinga, who, despite having not met Mr. Jairus by his own admission, knew of his good deeds. Honourable Kapinga gave a testimony about his own mother, Memshoba Kapinga, whom he was proud to say he has and still rides on the good name she left behind. No wonder you won your elections first time, Kenny. I was saying, no wonder you won your elections the first time round, Kenny. In that regard, I urge Botswana, especially our young people, to remember this in everything they do and say. Lina la itirelwa. Let us therefore uphold the principle of botho in everything that you do, so that we continue to be a nation known for unity, respect for one another, and peace. Mr. Speaker, since this is the beginning of the plowing season, I urge all of us, and I mean all, to take advantage of the rainy season to go out and plow. Please continue adhering to the health protocols of social distancing, wearing masks appropriately in public, and washing your hands with soap and or sanitizing. I thank you for your attention. Apula ena magadi renele.